We have it. I don't know if the PowerPoint is really. I have the links there. But just in case if
Just in case that breaks up, we go to the link.
Sure.
Hey guys, we're going to get started. Could I ask you to fill in up here, please, and move forward if you don't mind? We want to get some people up front here, please. We're a couple minutes behind schedule today, but that's okay. So before we start, by way of introduction, I'd just like to introduce these two gentlemen. Some of you who may have attended Mises U in the past may have seen this presentation, which they've given here before, although it's changed and updated a bit. And so both Luis Cirocco and Dr. Rafael Acevedo are gentlemen we've gotten to know not only professionally through the Mises Institute, but also personally as friends.
Yes.
And we're so thrilled that they're here with us. Dr. Acevedo is teaching and working at Texas Tech. Luis Cirocco lives in Venezuela. And this presentation is really eye-opening. It's something you're going to enjoy and learn from quite a bit. And we're just thrilled to have them with us. So please, a big round of applause to both of them for joining us. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We're more than honored to be here once again to present how socialism and nothing else has plunged our country into the most serious economic, social, and political crisis of its recent history. Disentangling a complex combination of socialism, even under its democratic form, Keynesianism or mercantilism, so rooted in the Venezuelan culture for decades, is not a simple task, and many times impose huge costs on those who defend ethics and liberty. For the third consecutive year, we have been given the chance to speak here about what is happening in our country. Words are not enough to express how grateful we are with the Mises Institute's staff and donors for this opportunity. Our journey will start from the current situation. While thousands of people die as we speak, a common day in the political arena is like this slide shows. We will also talk about some outstanding facts of the past and present days that will enable us to see beyond appearances. In other words, we will attempt to unmask Venezuelan socialism, and we will explain why none of the current political leaders promotes real free market reforms. Let's get started. On a daily basis, many Venezuelans leave their country because it is the last hope for them to survive. As a friend once said, the government took the right to freely choose and the right to property from you. Now they will go for your life. We, Venezuelans, are not worried about having to learn a new culture, a new language, so you can hear me, working in any activity, or even being the forever foreigner, far away from our homeland. We have to do it because our families, their future, and despite some news about a few Venezuelans behaving inappropriately abroad, the good people are much more. Venezuelans are running away of what BBC reported in January of this year. Let's see this short video.
The cleanup the day after, when there's chaos at a political level, that's normally followed by a chaos on the streets.
Do you have
At
some?
least a dozen people were killed in anti-government protests yesterday. Many more, like Jesus, were injured. Last night, a battle broke out between armed local boys and the security forces. They came into the slum, and people started shouting at them, telling them things like, "Do you not struggle to
Are you hearing?
too?"
No?
No.
Yes.
You try the microphone on the far right.
The microphone.
No. Is it maxed out volume-wise?
Oh.
It was horrible.
But I think,
Bullets fired, rubber
still
bullets too. Over there,
too low.
here, waves of people coming and going. But what's really going on in this country? I've been to Venezuela several times in the last 2 years to report on the gravity of the humanitarian crisis. I've met some of those who are the most vulnerable and see how more and more people are living off the streets, sometimes even chasing rubbish trucks to find something to eat. Venezuelan government took almost full control of the food supply in the last 2 years, but amid claims of mismanagement and a simultaneous crash in oil prices, most supermarkets were left like this. No food, no food. In my last visit to Venezuela a few months ago, I found something even more shocking. Rotten beef is also sold here in this market. It smells strong. It's got flies all over it. How did it all come to this? The government blames US economic sanctions, but they were imposed after the economy fell into recession. Many believe instead that this is a result of an influx of cash, a historic oil revenue being badly managed by the ruling party. This is why many Venezuelans elected Hugo Chavez almost 20 years ago as an alternative to the traditional, but widely perceived as corrupt parties. But under him is when things may have started to unravel. Today, with international pressure rising, the risk of a popular revolt against President Maduro has never been higher. Vladimir Hernandez, BBC News.
Okay. The media over the world have reported the current situation as a humanitarian tragedy, which is totally true. Venezuela is facing the most serious crisis of the last century, and even of the region, as a result of the progressive destruction inflicted by socialism, and let me repeat, nothing else but socialism. One of the richest countries of the world in terms of natural resources is now experiencing dramatic levels of hyperinflation, shortages, poverty, and extreme poverty. As shown in the picture, eating from garbage dumps is becoming more and more frequent as poverty grows. Many have also declared that the health system is in collapse. El País from Spain and other media outlets have reported it. In brief, people cannot afford to purchase an insurance, and even if they can, there is no guarantee that medicines, equipment, and doctors will be available when they run into a medical emergency. The public health system is a chaos. Children, adults, and elderly die at the doors of hospitals because they lack a common antibiotic, or even worse, an aspirin. A rapid search on Google will show how women deliver babies while are waiting in long lines to be attended, or in the waiting rooms of hospitals. Scarcity is part of the everyday language among Venezuelans. Long lines to purchase basic products have been normal for years over there. In 2018, some firms reported more than 80% of scarcity in almost all goods, including the toilet paper. We are the 8th country of the world with natural gas reserves, but we have to wait for more than 3 weeks to buy just 1 cylinder of gas to cook. We used to sell electricity to Brazil and Colombia, but now cannot even satisfy our internal demand at this moment. And the height of sarcasm is precisely what these pictures show: the country with the largest oil reserves in the world facing gas shortages. This is ridiculous and hopeless. Because of the evil incentives that socialism creates, corruption and mismanagement easily emerge in phrases like, they have not invested timely in strategic sectors, they never apply maintenance routines to prevent this from happening, or they are a bunch of criminals who only rob the nation, are frequently heard among people to explain the electrical system disaster with massive and recurrent blackout that we have to bear. Well, because I'm living here now. No politician, even those belonging to the self-called right wing, dare to say that what Venezuelans are suffering now is one of the last stage of socialism. It is very important that the young American people, as well as the young people from other countries, understand that such an evil system as socialism can nothing but destroy your countries, your hopes, your lives. There is no doubt about it. Many indicators that have reached worrying levels there help us support the point. This particular one, reported by the United Nations, by the way, indicates that 3,700,000 people reached the undernourishment state in 2017. Not to mention that more than 4 million people have left the country up to now. More than 40% spend the whole day without eating, while more than 60% eat in inappropriate places, such as dumpster. Almost 80% eat less, according to Caritas Venezuela. Not to mention that the average Venezuelan has lost 10 kilograms in weight.
I'm pretty sure Rafael is not counted in that statistic, you know.
Yeah.
Too much McDonald's.
Take some beers. Barbecue. Okay? Then, an immediate question that comes to mind will be, why a rich country like Venezuela with so much oil can go through a crisis of this magnitude? For years during Chavez's administration, oil was sold at the historical peak prices internationally. So how is it possible? Let us see what the former Goldman Sachs and partner has to say about it.
Peter Kernan, what's your take on the collapse of Venezuela?
You know, the real tragedy in all this, Stuart, is that if you go back a few years ago when oil was at $100 a barrel, what was it doing for the people of Venezuela? What did they do during all those periods of time when they were manufacturing and producing oil at this very high? They squandered it. They borrowed heavily. They're in debt up to here to China. Did they help their people? No. Did they do things with their hospitals or their schools? No. They had $100 oil, and they squandered. They have enough oil in Venezuela to embarrass the Saudis. They are swimming in oil. What did they do when they had peak oil prices? Nothing. They ran a Venezuelan socialist opportunity for Maduro and his friends to enrich themselves. They did not help the people. They were nationalizing things like the food stores and all of that. They ran their business and their country into the ground with record high oil prices. Blaming it on today's $50, where were you at $100? You were in the same soup.
Well said, Peter. Thanks for straightening that one out. Got it.
Sources like the International Monetary Fund and the Central Bank of Venezuela reveal that critical social and economic indicators have declined during the administration of Chavez's inheritor, Maduro. Starting with the oil exports, which, by the way, are run by the state. The GDP growth rate is negative since 2014. And if you look at the different sectors, the scenario is worse. How about poverty and extreme poverty? They have increased. These, we have to say, are conservative statistics. Speaking of poverty, we have to focus now on its major cause, hyperinflation. As Rothbard and many other Austrian scholars have studied, in economies during this scourge, barter becomes frequent and people tend to migrate to other currencies or media of exchange, while authorities use new banknotes. In the table below, you can see the enormous difference between the estimation of Venezuela's inflation rate and those in Zimbabwe, Iran, and Argentina. As Dr. Steve Hanke says, Venezuela's economy has collapsed. This is the result of years of socialism, incompetence, and corruption, among other things. An important element that mirrors the economy's collapse is Venezuela's currency, the Bolivar. It is not trustworthy. Venezuela's exchange rate regime provides no discipline. It only produces instability, poverty, and the world's highest inflation rate for 2018. Indeed, Venezuela's annual inflation rate at the end of 2018 was 80,000%. If you ask a common Venezuelan how he or she is currently surviving there, the answer will be most likely be in Spanish, fe, F-E, which literally means in English, faith. But in our context, it is the acronym of Familia en el Exterior, or family abroad. Everybody's surviving for their family abroad. In order to put you in context, we will show the salaries earned by the different categories of university professors in Venezuela compared to those of the United States. Then, we will show how many basic products a Venezuelan full professor can buy with his salary totally allocated to that product category. We have to say that all calculations are conservative because the official exchange rate of 6,500 bolivars per dollar in June 29th and July 4th were used to build these tables. Today, the exchange rate is 10,000, more than 10,000 bolivars per dollar, okay? Notice that the full professor earns are only around US $15.48 per month compared to the $11.83,000 per month that a full professor in the United States earns, according to the American Association of University Professors. The deterioration of the salaries in Venezuela has been remarkable in the last 18 years, as shown in the table. For instance, this. A full professor earned $2,400 per month in 2001, which adjusted by inflation corresponded to a monthly salary of $3,500 today. In addition, the minimum wage in Venezuela is around $9.39 US dollars per month. Just to mention some examples of a full professor could buy only 5 liters of vegetable oil, 3 kilograms of beef, 1 kilogram of tuna, 7 units of deodorant, and so on, if his entire salary were allocated just for that purpose. So, if he buys just 5 liters, he cannot buy anything. Numbers are obviously worse for those earning minimum wage. How about buying medicines, paying services, supporting a family? Unthinkable and again, hopeless. I would like to know what those American politicians supporting socialism will say if somebody tells them, okay, you will earn less than 90x a month, okay? Contrary to what many people disseminate or propose, we went to the disaster through socialism and nothing else. Of course, there was mismanagement, but engendered by socialism. In other words, a socialist mismanagement. Many people just talk about Chavez's socialism and underestimate the fact that its perverse incentives were sown long before. Like this report of recent TV, we want to remark that Chavez just exacerbated the mistakes of the past.
The collapse of Venezuela's economy is both horrifying and predictable, and the world needs to understand why. Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves, and it was once Latin America's richest country.
Caracas, the swinging city of Venezuela. Good climate, fine buildings, wide highways with plenty on them. All in all, a pretty nice place to be for many reasons.
Today, most grocery store shelves are empty, and Venezuelans are so hungry that they're killing zoo animals for sustenance. Toilet paper, diapers, and toothpaste are luxury goods. Venezuelan hospitals have disintegrated. Children are dying because they can't get antibiotics, and the infant mortality rate is higher than Syria's. The capital city of Caracas is the murder capital of the world, and just 12% of citizens feel safe walking alone at night, which is the lowest figure reported in the world. The government blames slumping oil prices for the desperate situation, but the real cause is the socialist economy. The government sets the price of staples such as rice, pasta, and flour, resulting in chronic shortages. Former President Hugo Chavez nationalized industries, confiscated property, and kicked out foreign companies. The government is trying to print its way out of the crisis, resulting in a 700% annual inflation rate. After a sham election, President Nicolas Maduro, the hand-picked successor of Chavez, is rounding up his opponents and putting them in jail. Despite this, Maduro and his predecessors still have their defenders, ranging from Sean Penn to Michael Moore to Naomi Klein, who once signed a petition saying, "We would vote for Hugo Chavez," and praised the autocrat in 2007 for creating a zone of relative economic calm and predictability. In 2013, journalist David Cirocco praised Hugo Chavez's economic miracle, writing that the socialist leader had a record that a legacy-obsessed American president could only dream of achieving. But the real lesson of Venezuela's tragic collapse is that real socialism always leads to economic breakdown and political repression. Those of us in wealthier, freer countries need to keep Venezuela in mind as we confront calls for more regulation and government control of all aspects of our lives.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about some Venezuela's president. Although he's considered the father of democracy, Rómulo Betancourt, a former communist turned in a social democrat, inflicted serious damages on the high levels of economic freedom Venezuela had enjoyed up to 1958. And there was no technical reason to do so. Look at how, for example, he created a central planning office, a state-owned oil company, founded OPEC, increased taxes, and controlled prices. These are historical facts. During his first administration, he nationalized the commanding heights, this other president, and the central bank in its entirety, and implemented complex regulation unfriendly to business. Carlos Andrés Pérez attempted to take the other way during his second presidential period, supported by renowned Keynesian economists, but efforts were not enough to allow free markets to work. Corruption, inflation, cronyism, nepotism, high cost of doing business, and state ownership of the commanding heights kept being remarkable features. On the other hand, Chávez's mandate was nothing but the exacerbation of the socialist and mercantilist institution of the past decades. He passed a new constitution, applied redistributionism, promoted devaluation and high inflation, implemented an extreme exchange control, and militarized the economy. He was blessed by the high oil prices. Under his regime, elites continued to enjoy protectionism. The professional middle class turned into low-income class, and new high classes emerged, bolichicos and boliburgueses, which are elites taking advantage of the bloated corruption, such as Derwick Associates and many others. Maduro has not been so lucky in terms of counting on high oil prices because they went down since he officially assumed power. He has continued Chávez's policies and has plunged the country into a tremendous hyperinflation, accompanied by rampant corruption, crimes against humanity, guerrilla, terrorism, drug trafficking, poverty, all over the country. His closest officers are related with terrorists and drug trafficking groups. One of the key evidence showing the disastrous consequences of gradually destroying economic freedom and moving towards socialism from before Chávez is this graph. We make with data from Penn World Table database by dividing our GDP per capita by the GDP per capita of a mature economy like the United States. Up to 1958, the red line, this is the 50s. Up to 1958, our growth was tremendously high. And then we started to go down and down up to 2003, when the blessing of peak oil prices began, this increment. Of course, in this point, started the social democracy in Venezuela. Well, Luis.
I know that Dr. Newman said that GDP has limitations, but we think, in this case, it is enough to show that something remarkably wrong happened in our economy. By the way, I'm referring to Dr. Newman number 1. These tables present more evidence on the fact that the problem did not start with Chávez and Maduro, but just complicated. Notice that during the 1950s, because of our high growth rates, we were considered by the specialized literature as an economic miracle. While from 1960 to the present days, we became a disaster. The high growth rates of 2004 to 2008, as you can see in the table, were caused by the oil prices and not by institutions promoting economic freedom. In fact, Venezuela by that time served only 3% of the world market at prices of around 120 US dollars per barrel. While in the 1950s, there is a big difference here, it served 13% of the world market with prices of around $3 to $4 per US barrel. You can notice the difference. It's a huge difference. But had much more pro-market institutions at that time. By the way, we think that one of the key things that the new government should do first is to get out of that cartel called OPEC and lean toward the privatization and efficiency direction one more time. We've always stated that freedom involves economic, political, and civil aspects. Nevertheless, as we understand it, economic freedom is the most important side because individual prosperity and need satisfaction are directly tied to it. As expected, decreasing levels of economic freedom were accompanied by decreasing levels of political and civil rights as well. Notice the opposite path that Venezuela took compared to that of the developing world. If you see here, well, this is not working, okay. This is the path we took, okay? And this is the path that the developing world took up to 2013. Based upon the economic freedom of the world index path, we have just fallen. A clear indication of our expanding socialist appetite. Many Venezuelans are migrating to Chile, Ecuador, or Argentina due to higher levels of economic freedom there. As you can see in this slide, we performed better than these countries many years ago. But our downward trend caused by the progressive damage inflicted by socialist policies makes us much worse today. Despite all this evidence, there are people who still believe in many experts who state and who talk about Venezuela's situation. For those pundits, the good socialism has not been implemented yet in our country. They should know that we have always had enshrined as constitutional rights the free and compulsive education, the free healthcare system, and many other intrusive rights, such as the right to work, the right to housing, the right to food, and even the madness to demand from the government the provision of happiness. Can you believe this? Those experts' only argument is that Venezuela is not a socialist country because the means of production of many sectors are in private hands. Ridiculous. We are worried about some surveys in America showing increasing levels of confidence in promises that destroyed Venezuela and many other countries, especially on the young American people. I think it's appropriate to quote Jeff Deist at this point, who gently wrote a blurb in our book, Prosperity and Liberty, What Venezuela Needs. And Jeff says, the problem requires understanding real freedom. Good intentions, especially fake good intentions, will not suffice. We totally understand young people because we were also young, not so long ago. It's easy to fall in love with those promises of a better world. Even Hayek did it at the beginning, before reading Mises' Socialism. However, it's necessary to keep in mind that there is no perfect system. But socialism is the worst option since it goes against the human nature, the human action. Let us see what a known American politician has to say on the socialism he aspires for his country.
When I talk about democratic socialism, you know what I'm talking about? Social Security, one of the most popular and important programs in this country, developed by FDR to give dignity and security to seniors. And it has been enormously successful in reducing poverty among seniors. When I talk about democratic socialism, I am talking about Medicare, a single-payer healthcare system for the elderly. And in my view, we should expand that concept to all people. I believe that everybody in this country should be entitled to health care as a right, and the most effective way to do it is through a Medicare for all single-payer program. When I talk about democratic socialism, I'm not looking at Venezuela. I'm not looking at Cuba. I'm looking at countries like Denmark and Sweden. And you know what goes on in those countries? All of the kids who have the ability and desire go to college. And you know how much it costs? It is free. They have child care systems which are outstanding. They have public educational systems which are extremely strong. The retirement benefits for their elderly much better than they are in the United States. Bottom line is, when I talk about democratic socialism, what I mean is moving away from where we are right now.
Hey, YouTube fans, I'm Luke Russer. Thanks for checking out our MSNBC channel.
He claims that the socialism he wants for America is the one implemented in the Scandinavian countries, not the Venezuelan one. Although he shamelessly said, which you can read in the picture as well, he said that he must study how the performance of those nations, in terms of many variables, has deteriorated when the radical socialist policies and then the welfare state policies were implemented. Compared to their previous performance, the wealth of those nations was achieved basically respecting private property and free markets, before the radical socialist policies and before the welfare state policies implemented. However, it must be said that economic freedom is still a priority there. We have just seen all the socialist manifestations we have experienced in our modern history. As the Venezuelan economist Hugo Ferreira explains, paraphrasing Lenin, it does not matter if marginal sectors of the economy are allowed to be in private hands, while the commanding heights, say the oil industry, iron industry, money, energy in general, in the case of Venezuela, of course, are under governmental control. That is characteristic of an evil socialist system as well. Although some marginal sectors of the economy, such as beer, well, except for Rafael, I think beer is a commanding height for him. So, clothing, construction, and so on are owned by private firms. There are many governmental controls on those industries as well, that only cronies on a large scale can be really profitable. So yes, all these are indications that Venezuela is a socialist country. Although, when I see this slide with these two difficult questions, I dare to say that the first one is easier to solve than the second one, given the profound roots of socialism in our minds and formal institutions in Venezuela. By the way, one of the worst obstacles for a free market transformation there is Venezuelan culture. Remember, the socialist agenda has been strongly in place since 1958, at least. At this moment, almost all Venezuelans say they do not like socialism, but while apparently supporting the liberalization of the economy, are major supporters of helping people through free education, a free healthcare system, and a government-owned oil industry. Although we had strong socialist institutions before Chavez, we were in a democracy with alternation of power every 5 years, in which we also experienced high corruption, populism, nepotism, bureaucracy, and bloated cronism. All of the presidents we had were democratic socialists, but at least respected such imperfect democracy in terms of living power. Now, things changed. The scourges of the past were magnified, and even the imperfect democracy we had disappeared. Normally, people ask this question, why hasn't the regime collapsed? Which is what any outsider could wonder as well. People ask this question, as we have reported and published in different digital media and interviews, the main pillars on which this regime rests are a corrupted military power, a collaborationist opposition, and international collusion. You can hear many reasons in Venezuela, but in our view, the main one is that the official opposition does not oppose. As per some media have reported, belonging to the official opposition over there is one of the most profitable businesses. Then, evil interests and incentives are in place to preserve the status quo. Nobody wants to lose privileges. Sadly true, what Venezuelans can aspire with these political leaders, in the best case, is to have a more democratic socialism taking place, but ultimately, socialism. We have declared and shown proofs that many of the opposition parties belong to the International Socialist Organization, and those that do not belong to it are still contrary to institutions protective of the natural rights of the human being, the reduction of government, the privatization of the commanding height, and monetary freedom. The current interim president, Juan Guaido, is a member of one of the most socialist parties in Venezuela, which is heading and promoting, along with other social democrat parties, the total pardon of corruption and other cases associated with the government officers, and the potential integration of a new government with them included. Those opposition representatives are advocated to do this because many of them and their relatives are involved in corruption cases, reason why it's not convenient to structurally change the system. Behind democratic socialism, there is a group of internationally renowned Keynesian economists who support liberalizing the economy, but up to a certain point, enough to produce a rebound and return privileges to their cronies. They're all prone to central planning, not to mention the social media influencers, self-called intellectuals, who support the status quo. Chavez was very good at exporting his Bolivarian revolution, sponsored by the oil prices of the moment. He granted more than $500 million for poor communities in the United States, almost $20 million to finance a movie of Danny Glover, and more than $4 million for cleaning the Bronx. Not to mention that he financed the diesel for public transportation in London as well, and different types of help for other Caribbean and Latin American countries. That's part of the reason why international supporters of this regime are spread all over the world, including the US. At the bottom of the picture, you can see the major stakeholders. Russia, to which Maduro's regime owes more than $6 billion. China, which has invested more than $62 billion in the country. Turkey, which manages the gold business, representing approximately $1.1 billion per year, and others, such as Hezbollah and ISIS. Einstein once said that expecting different results from doing the same over and over again is insanity. In our view, Plan País, or the morning after plan, proposed by the current opposition in case Maduro leaves, is the best practical example of what Einstein defined as insanity. Such plan will not bring stable and long-lasting prosperity. It comprises a bunch of Keynesian and socialist strategies that people behind it failed to apply in the past and now go for their second chance. Of course, I have to be honest and say that having a cancer phase 2 is better than having a cancer phase 4, but it's ultimately cancer. This plan will produce, in the best case, an economic rebound that will sooner or later vanish, because the changes it comprises are not structural ones. Part of the plan consists of borrowing more than $60 billion from the International Monetary Fund. But look at this. Still keeping the oil business in the hands of the government. Not enshrining monetary freedom as a mechanism to better protect savings and incomes. Maintaining the privileges of their cronies. Not eliminating international trade barriers. Subsidies through government expenditures, and so on. Paraphrasing the words of these plan creators, the Venezuelan economy is like a taxi driver who does not have money to buy spurs or tires for his car. Then, through government expenditures, they will provide what he needs. We believe in a new leadership that is emerging from young people, not in the current opposition. Young people who abide by the principles of real capitalism, who believe in and respect the natural rights of the human being. The reason is that only those people can conduct the structural changes that our economy requires, as other countries have performed in the past. At Econintech, we're proud to contribute to this titanic task by educating our students and disseminating free market ideas in Venezuela. Our proposal basically consisted in starving the government, implementing monetary freedom, reducing to a minimum level the cost of doing business, a massive privatization program for all state-owned enterprises and assets, as well as of the education and healthcare systems, eliminating complex regulations, unilateral elimination of all international trade barriers, and, in a nutshell, making people responsible for their own future and giving them the opportunity to alleviate and overcome poverty through free market benefits. Although seen with skeptical eyes by those who do not want to change, is a breath of hope. In our book, Prosperity and Liberty, What Venezuela Needs, carefully edited by Rafael and available at the Mises Institute's bookstore, we delve into the reforms we envision for our country. The book is divided into 3 parts. Part 1, Causes and Symptoms, which comprises essays from Walter Block and other scholars explaining the situation and how we arrived to this misery level. Part 2, Successful Cures, where 4 examples of countries that overcame similar crises by applying radical free market reforms can be found. The contributions of Robert Lawson and Leszek Balcerowicz here are essential. And Part 3, the general treatment, where Steve Hanke and other scholars explain some of the change proposals. The foreword and epilogue were written by Benjamin Powell. One more time, thank you for allowing us to talk about the dramatic situation of our country. Thank you very much.
that go down and have a cider and beer at the same time.
Sure.
Plastic, though. Oh, well, you know, they look class. It's all about appearances. Okay.
Okay, this is our class about, it's really a writing class, because I'm just going to complain about bad things that people do when they submit articles. But the end result is going to be, I'm going to tell you how you should write a good article. And not just for me, though. I'm assuming other editors are this way, but I don't ever talk to other editors, so I don't really know. Obviously, the articles they edit are of lower quality than what we run at Mises.org, so I guess I can't speak for them. But they, by the time we're done, you'll know what is necessary for a top-quality journalistic type of column for a website like Mises.org.
Exactly.
Top shelf.
Just out of curiosity, raise your hand if you have ever written for Mises.org. Okay, yeah, we got a couple people in the room. How about raise your hand if you write for other blogs or other publications? Okay. So it's a decent amount. Okay.
And if I've ever rejected one of your articles, just so I know ahead of time.
We got one person here. Okay, that's okay.
Somebody was coming in and talking about submitting articles, so I'm already on a roll. Okay. Kind of talking about stuff. So I don't know, let's just start talking about kind of what Mises.org is and what the audience is supposed to be and all of that. So the Mises Institute has really two different faces that it presents to the world. There's the academic side of things, and that's the faculty. And they have academic journal, and they run programs like this, which are designed for people who are in academic programs and all of that. And then there's the other side, which puts out content for just the regular layman in an attempt to engage that side of the world. Because, of course, that's always been very important to the Austrian school. It's not just speaking to other economists and trying to make things as arcane and difficult to understand as possible, but actually trying to engage regular people. And I mean, you can see this all the time, that economics has a bad reputation. I remember a few years ago, I had to go to the doctor, I had the flu or something, and she asked me what I did, and I said, oh, I edit an economics website. And she looked at me like this was just the worst possible thing that anybody could do for a living or read on purpose. I mean, she just couldn't understand. This person was like a doctor, so it's not like she was just too dumb to get it. So economics isn't exactly starting from like the most popular place in the world, which is kind of a self-inflicted wound, I think, that economists put onto themselves. So we're trying to put stuff out there that people can read and organize into their brain in a way that they can use elsewhere and has some applicability to their daily lives. So it's going to be very different if you write something for me than if you write something for Joe Salerno in the journal.
And if you do have questions about academic journals, we've got the QJAE, the Quarterly Journal of Austrian Economics, and we are relaunching the Journal of Libertarian Studies, which is more focused on libertarian philosophy. If you have interest in that, please talk to me afterwards. Dr. Terrell is the managing editor for that. He's the person to talk to. I'm happy to connect you. But if you are interested in the scholarly side, come up to me afterwards.
Yes, and sometimes I'll still get submissions that really belong at the journal, and then I'll send people over there. But for the most part, we're talking about stuff that you want to imagine like one of our donors or one of our regular readers. So this is going to be someone who's like a stockbroker or an accountant or maybe a doctor, and they're getting into their office in the morning and they don't really want to start their day yet, but they want to read something maybe on Mises.org. And so they're going to click there, and they want something that they can read in like 8 to 10 minutes. And they don't want something that's just mind-blowingly difficult with lots of like charts and letters and like A sub 1 is going to do this and B sub 2 did that. And if you move the line up, you're going to have a different equilibrium point. I mean, just imagine reading that like right before you start your work day. It's not going to be a popular article, I can tell you that much. And I'm probably not going to want to run it. And so what you are going to want to write is something that someone would read like in a newspaper, albeit for a newspaper for a more informed, more kind of free market leaning group. And so that's what you really want to shoot for, something that somebody can read in their spare time and be both amused and informed. So if your article can be read in a reasonable amount of time, if it contains something where the person finishes the article and thinks, I think I learned something there, and also if they think at the end of the article I was mildly entertained, that was somewhat entertaining when I read that, like I didn't hate that, and I wasn't bored out of my mind, it wasn't a slog getting to the end of this article. And I could never figure out what the writer was trying to say. Those are all bad things. You want it to be fun and easy. And I mean, that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for each and every article to be some groundbreaking thing. It could be that the body of your work over a period of years is groundbreaking, that hundreds of articles that you write over the years end up really changing people's minds in a very important way. But you can't look at each individual article that way.
Right. And this is something I know that Jeff Deist has talked about throughout the week. Joseph Salerno has talked about. It's like, most people here, your students, probably undergrads, maybe some of you go on in graduate school, become professors yourself. But the thing is, like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Right, we've got the ideas out there. We've got Rothbard, we've got Mises. They've done the heavy lifting. What we need, what works, what helps communicate these messages is that you take topics that you yourself are interested in. Think of your competitive advantage. What do you research on your own time? For example, I like sports. Okay, I've got several articles where I've tried to kind of work Austrian concepts into like the business of the NFL. Problem is, we don't really have a very large sports audience, I've realized, because those articles never particularly do well. But, that's something I can bring to the table. I've got some fresh NFL knowledge. If you have an opening in your fantasy league, feel free to hit me up afterwards. But and then I use that, which I've got an above average skill set relative to most Austrian economists, and then I can work in basic Austrian concepts within that. And if you can do that with an 800 word article, then that's the sort of content that we're looking for. Something that you bring something unique to the table in terms of your own outside of interest, and then working in kind of core Austrian concepts. That ends up being some of the best content we have. Because again, if you get someone who's interested in football and they just read one Mises quote, that's a small step in the right direction in this world.
Yeah, that's fine. Just have one Mises quote in there or none. I mean, if it's an easy read and it's fun to read, I'm going to be a lot more forgiving on whether it meets some like rigorous criteria as how Austrian it is, as long as it doesn't have something that's anti-Austrian in it. And that's normally what I'm looking for on that final read through. Is there something in here that's like, that is some pro-war comment or something where they like advocate to raise taxes or something like that? Now, we actually at the Mises Institute have pretty broad ideological tolerance, if you will. We're the only think tank really that has a variety of views on immigration, for example. And I'm willing to consider all sorts of different authors and sources and different points of view and so on. I mean, within reason. I'm not going to run your article that says that this sort of tax is a great idea or that really rent control isn't that bad. And I mean, one question I would ask myself is, this is the sort of thing that somebody could read on 10,000 other websites. I mean, I'm often confused when people send me something that would be perfect to run in like some mainstream left-of-center publication, but for some reason they think it should go on Mises.org. I mean, if it could just go in, I don't even know what, the Atlantic, I guess, then run it in the Atlantic. Of course, what's really true a lot of the time is that person who just has like that really mainstreamy left-of-center opinion, the reason they sent it to me is because the Atlantic already rejected it. And so I guess maybe they're hoping they can get it on our website or something. But no, I'm looking for something that's going to be unique, that's really going to reflect our point of view. But at the same time, I try to not really keep everyone rigidly within some very slim thing. If it doesn't really run afoul any of those things, but it just offers some new information, and you don't have to hit everybody over the head with some conclusion either. In conclusion, I just wanted to note that freedom is better than slavery, and everyone should agree with me, the end. I mean, you can just leave off that last paragraph entirely, because what people are really reading it for is that interesting stuff where they just learned something they didn't know about before. People get that if it's at Mises.org, the author probably thinks that freedom's better than slavery and that this information you're presenting is in the service of that general idea, so you don't have to really belabor that point. You could use the space available to you to just present more interesting information.
And some of the things that end up doing particularly well for us is like, everyone, I'm sure everyone in this room has done it. You're in a Facebook debate with someone, and you're trying to make a point, and so you just go to Google and you type into something that just proves your point, right? And you just throw it in there. The ways of communicating, we love factual information, like when comparing and contrasting, for example, the performance of European states. I mean, one of our most popular articles in the last few years was one by Ryan did. I mean, he cranks out like half our content anyway, so I think the majority of our popular articles come from Ryan. And it was looking at the actual cost of living, basically that European countries were poorer than most American countries. And it was looking at like incomes on average. It was counting into, he's already working in government program benefits, right? So they can't just say, oh, well, they have, they get free health care, right? No, he already factored that in. And like being able to go, having an article that says, Americans are richer than Europeans, right? That's a very useful article in Facebook debates, right? So anything that's useful, like say if you find yourself in a topic where you're debating, making the same point time and time again, well, that right there is probably an article that other people would find useful, unless you're really weird, which I'm sure there's a couple people in here that might fit that. But like, it's that sort of stuff that ends up being very, very effective on social media, which obviously helps drive traffic, which helps us. It also helps get your name out there. It's useful content rather than trying to create some brand new theory and some original work. It's something that's useful and back and forth debate, I think it ends up being.
Well, the best way, of course, to guess about the sort of articles we run is to read the articles on the site and to be very familiar with them and to show some familiarity with what other people are writing and that sort of thing. I'm often shocked sometimes when people submit topics which show no awareness whatsoever of like the 50 articles already written on that topic that ran within the last 5 years. And apparently none of that matters to this new author. So it's useful to kind of build on what's already been done. Topic selection. I mean, I get a lot of questions about should I run an article on this topic, and often they're fine. It's just I can't promise if something's going to be runnable until I actually see the article. But I should note kind of, like regardless of topic, just kind of the way it works is, so we already talked about being aware of what your reader audience is, right? This is a lay person, probably pretty smart, and they only have so much time to do this. But the other audience that you have is me, in that this is something that when Ryan sees my name in the inbox, will he be happy or will he feel exhausted? Because I've now given Ryan an errand where he has to read the article and then explain to me why this article was rejected. And there's nothing more delightful than getting an article in your inbox where you know as soon as you see the person's name, oh, I'm not going to have to edit that hardly at all. I'm just going to read it real quick, and then I'm going to cut and paste it into the website, and then I'm going to get on with my day. And my preferred part of my job is writing my own articles. That's just what I find most interesting. I like the process of writing. And I like doing that sort of thing. So the editing part is just something I have to do. And so if an article comes in where I can just spend a few minutes on it and I'm done, that's like a cherry on top of my day. That makes me so incredibly happy. So I want everything that comes in to be amazing. I don't want to reject stuff. I don't want to not like stuff. I want to find everything delightful and interesting. And so believe me, I take no pleasure whatsoever in telling people, well, rewrite this, specifically this paragraph, et cetera, et cetera. It's all very exhausting. I learned a bit, one of the best training for this job, by the way, was when I used to teach political science part-time at the college level, and there were a lot of papers assigned. And I did that for like 8 or 9 years. And you would have to grade the paper. And it was kind of similar to this in the sense that if it was a grade paper and you could just give it an A, you didn't have to explain to the student why they got an A. Hey, good job, A. And then you move on to the next paper. But like a B- paper, a C paper, that takes forever to grade. Because you got to go through it, you got to like make comments, you got to explain to the student why they didn't get an A. I guess not all professors do this, but I felt like an obligation to do this. And I mean, who wants to do that? Which, by the way, I think is one motivation for grade inflation. Just give everybody an A- and saves you work as the instructor. But so I would have preferred that everybody wrote A papers. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. So I would explain to them what they had to do. And a lot of the things that I would tell people what they had to do then was the same thing as now. Use concrete examples, like create a mental image in people's heads that they can understand. Don't use like a bunch of vague terminology about, well, if you imagined a group of people with no particular name, so now I'm imagining in my head just kind of this like vague group of people. If they do X and then this group does Y, then Z might happen. I mean, now I have no idea what's going on. It would be better if like you used maybe like a historical example that people could follow, or maybe a real world example right now, or maybe at least a thought experiment where the people had names and they were interacting with like real, like physical things I could imagine in my head and so on. So all too often people who are at, kind of our level, they're graduate students and so on, and they're just thinking a lot in abstractions. That just doesn't work in this format in something like Mises.org. You got to be like using like real visual images that people can imagine. Also, once you make a point and you say, this is the way things are, then you need to have examples, preferably 2 or 3. So examples are always very important, preferably real world examples if you can. And just to have something that is easy for the reader to follow, and it shouldn't have to be something that seems real academic-y. And then other useful things are like compare and contrast. This is a good thing because X, and it's different from this bad thing. Phrases like on the other hand are really good, or phrases like nevertheless, or however, or and yet, and all of these conjunctions that maybe if you had a good English teacher taught you those sorts of things in essay writing, all of that stuff still applies now. You got to be like making distinctions. That's an old Latin phrase. It was he who teaches well makes distinctions. So I'm taking two similar things, but I'm showing you why those things are really not that similar, why they're different. And all of these little things are what make up a good article, because I'm reading it and saying, oh, I never thought of it that way, or I guess those things really are different, or those things that I thought were different are actually kind of similar, or this thing isn't like that thing at all. And look at all these amazing sentences that use nice conjunctions and tie together phrases like on the other hand and so on. And that's an old economics joke, right, where some politician was complaining, I don't know, what's the old joke? Like economists have to have like so many hands because every sentence contains on the other hand, because economists were never willing to just say, this is the way things are. They were always explaining that there's trade-offs and that this might lead to that and nothing's perfect. And so everything you do costs you something else. And those are the sorts of things we need to include in our articles, especially for the reader to note that we're not naive, that we've taken into account a wide variety of different things, but we're also helping you understand how these things are different or similar. Or this one thing I'm going to explain to you that's important, here are all the examples of this thing in the real world. And so by the time the person's finished their 10 minutes, they're like, oh yeah, that was easy to understand because it was all like real world stuff I get, or they're talking about like apples, or they're talking about houses, or they're talking about like homeless people, something that has an image in my head, and I can proceed from there.
And you know, one of the great things about Mises U, we have so many people from so many different countries, different backgrounds. Again, like the examples of what's going on in other countries. You know, there's a lot of really good lessons that can be educational for an American audience. You know, we were talking with Professor Dominiak about some Polish history that he thought had some relevance. You know, that's stuff we're not afraid of. You know, simply because we're a majority American outlet. Again, there's something to be said about the value of looking at history and looking at experience. And I know Patrick Newman made this point during his Conceived in Liberty talk. You know, how people like Rothbard saw that it's looking through history and showing these examples working is some of the most persuasive stuff that we have as libertarians. So that's another thing to think of. If you have something that's back home in your country that you think has some interesting libertarian relevance, helps make an argument for free markets, it makes an argument for political decentralization, which is always a winning thing. I know Jose Nino, he's had some very interesting articles on Venezuela and some political decentralization themes there. These are great topics for our outlet.
Yeah, and also if you write in other languages, if you do an article in another language, you can always translate it and then send it to me. If it ran somewhere else in another language, I'll run it in English. It's not even really technically the same article, so that's always fine. And I sometimes do that. I'll even keep an eye out for other people's. We have a guy named Fergan Azihari, a Frenchman, and he writes a bunch of stuff in French, but I keep track of what he writes in French, and then I ask him to write it in English if it's on a topic that we want. And so if you are doing that, if you're writing stuff in other languages, other places, then consider sending it to us also. And as a final note, I'll take a question here in a minute, because I noticed there were a couple questions maybe in the back. I just want to note that one way you can help yourself is just to familiarize yourself with column writing, not necessarily for us. Just like there's a lot of resources out there on how to write a column, how to write a journalism type article, and they're usually going to tell you things about how you need to present the most important information near the top and kind of tell us what the subject is. Like there's nothing worse than when I have to get in like 6 or 7 paragraphs in order to figure out what is the topic of this article. I don't even know what it is that I'm reading about yet. And there's lots of like big words and stuff, and then they finally get to the point like halfway in. The purpose of the article, remember, is to amuse and entertain and inform, not to convince everybody how amazingly intelligent we are. And I think that's kind of the problem we sometimes encounter is, I'm sure people, if you amuse and entertain them, they'll have a higher opinion of you than when they started. I mean, that's kind of like, that's the best service you can do for another person. But that's what they used to teach journalists, at least, was when you start writing an article, you need to start immediately with what the subject matter is. You tell us basically where the article's headed, and then all of that stuff below that, that's where the examples go. That's where the case studies go. That's where all the information that fills out the topic that makes me feel informed by the time I'm done. And you can get that sort of information on writing on any number of topics, but that basic skill of writing in that format is the same no matter what the topic is. And so that could help you quite a bit as well. So does anyone have questions or anything? I mean, somebody had a hand up earlier in the back, but maybe they don't care anymore. Yeah. You. Yes.
Okay, so my question is, what kind of expectations can someone from outside the country have with writing for the businesses?
Well, if if you sound like a native speaker, then it's not going to be an issue at all. Or if you're pretty close, I'll go through it and brush it up, especially if it's on a topic that I'm not going to get that topic from any American writer. So say you're like from Argentina and you just wrote like an interesting article about the Argentinian economy. I'm probably not going to get that from many native speakers. So I'm going to be interested in getting what I can on that topic. So as long as you're pretty close. I mean, if I've just spent a long time rewriting it, then I wouldn't. But I am interested in that, and it doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, does that answer your question?
Connected a little bit, like take a little bit farther. Could anyone expect to get to some job in writing and publishing if writing like articles for the institute? Like maybe apply for any future work with it?
Well, it's not a lucrative job, I'll tell you that much. Sure. Well, if you write for us, that helps you. I mean, you're already here at Mises U. I mean, but we will tell people that writing for us helps you later when you want to like go to Mises U again, or you want to apply for a fellowship or something like that. Those serve as writing samples for you. As far as writing, getting paid on a regular basis, that's something that can be achieved if you become one of those people where it doesn't require any editing. And it's just this person becomes a fixture. So this is a person I regularly get articles from. They're reliable. I don't have to really edit their articles significantly. That's the sort of person that we would pay. If I have to spend 20, 30 minutes editing somebody's article or more when they come in, I don't really want to pay that person because it's actually not saving me much time and work. But yeah, a lot of the people who get paid now, they've been around like for a long, long time. You'll notice, right, some of the old guys on the site who have, I mean, they've got stuff going back like 10, 15, 20 years. A lot of those guys get paid when they're regular writers. Sometimes people who have a particular area of expertise. But in most cases, it's got to be somebody who's writing stuff that actually saves us time, instead of adding a need to spend a lot of time editing it.
Yeah. I mean, if you're providing consistent value to the institute, then we value that, and that's great. Again, being a Mises U student definitely helps with that a lot. I mean, for one, you get the framework, obviously, that you've learned throughout this week. That helps us put a little bit of a stamp on you, which always helps. We can say that you're a Mises Institute scholar by going through our programs. That's always useful. But I mean, usually, and Ryan just talked about putting the good information at the front. Usually when we start this talk, we talk about not just how to write for Mises.org, but why should you write for Mises.org? Because again, I do think it's a great platform. We're one of the largest, most read econ blogs out there. We have every month we have well over 1 million views. Not only do we have a great built-in audience on the site itself, but we have other outlets that republish our work. I mean, Zero Hedge has a pretty large audience itself. They love republishing our stuff. There's several European sites that republish our stuff. Business Insider at times does as well. Good old Alex Jones's InfoWars. republishes. I'm a proud info warrior that I can bring up occasionally in certain audiences.
Yeah, and I can't get those articles removed.
They don't ask.
The
They don't ask for permission. They take it. So, but we have a lot of people that do republish content. I mean, there's even an Alabama-based website, Yellow Hammer, that has some pretty good Alabama news. I mean, they draw from that. So it's always interesting seeing those sources that republish our stuff because it is so readily available. So that we help amplify the reach there. We also have a very active Spanish language part of the website where we have a set of translators. So that's pretty cool too. And then we have other organizations that will pick up articles that they find relevant to their audiences. So I've had articles that have been translated to German, translated to French, translated to Chinese and Japanese, was very interesting. Mises Brazil will pull articles from our stuff. So it's a really cool way of building an international following for your work, publishing for our website. And then one of the last things that we're trying to do to, again, provide additional value to our writers is we're doing more audio translations of our stuff. So again, you can publish a single article for us, have it have it translated into Spanish, have it turned into a podcast, possibly have it translated several other times, possibly having it republished in other outlets. And if you do that consistently, then that gets you'll get some attention for it. I mean, we've had some people that have been able to spin that off into some blog careers for their own. I mean, you even had Bob Murphy get talked about in the New York Times by Paul Krugman because of an article that appeared on Mises.org. Noah Smith occasionally likes to take it's people taking whacks at us, but that's fine. That's great. So again, there is a lot of value that being a regular contributor to the Wire that can bring, including potentially even financially if you're creating consistent value that helps you stand out from the pack.
And I should note that although people look at me, think I'm a very grumpy man and maybe not very nice, I'm actually a very nice man. If you email me something, I'm going to answer you as best I can and actually try and help you improve. Because my goal is when I get people sending me articles, I don't want to tell that person to just get lost. I would love to cultivate a relationship with that person as a writer. And there are some writers where I've seen market improvements over sometimes just a few months, where you give them a bunch of feedback and they take that to heart. And then 6 months after your initial interaction, they're writing much, much better articles and writing more frequently. And so that's like my, obviously I would prefer everyone to come to me just like a perfectly formed, amazing writer right off the bat. But failing that, I'm always happy to work with someone until they can then consistently produce the sort of thing we like. And that's great, especially then if they become regular to us and don't feel that they need to go to other publications. And so the problem with email, of course, it might come across that, as I say, you need to fix this and that I sound grumpy, but I'm really not. I mean, and also you don't have to worry about me like making fun of you to anybody or anything like that. I work alone. I have like one friend, so I never socialize, so it's not like Ryan's snickering about some article of mine he dissed. It's not going to happen. I forget about it as soon as the day is over. So I'm always happy to see someone trying again or sending in another article that then maybe we might be able to use. So I would encourage people to try if it is the sort of thing you actually want to do.
Yes, Ford.
Well, I can tell you that something just inspired me with my own writing was always a lot of those historical articles that you would get at The Atlantic. I remember reading an article on the history of the crosswalk at The Atlantic, and it talked about how roads used to be just primarily used by pedestrians, and that it was the car that was seen as always had to yield to the pedestrian. And it kind of like went through changes in law that took place and how these local governments had tried to mandate special devices on automobiles that would slow them down within city limits and all of this stuff. And cities had these really low speed limits and all this thing. And then it looked at, over time, all the automobile companies lobbied the state legislatures to change the way that the roads were used, and then we created this idea of the crosswalk then. And then if you didn't stay in the crosswalk, then you were jaywalking. It was this like 20th century invention. And it was also relevant back at the time because then people were like getting beat up and murdered by cops and stuff for like jaywalking. And so I read this thing, I'm like, this is a really fascinating topic, right? By the time you're done reading it, you never look at a crosswalk the same way again, or like at pedestrian auto relations the same way again. So that's why I would end up writing articles on things like parking structures are like the livery stables of today. Like we're looking at how you used to have to park your horse like 100 years ago and how it was really expensive. So when people claim they want free parking all the time, this is like a really anti-libertarian thing, actually, is that paying for parking is actually the libertarian thing. And you're right, there's no such thing as a free lunch. But in order to really make that case, you had to delve into like this obscure history that I found really, really interesting. And where else were you gonna find an article about livery stables? Like nowhere. And so I kind of like that kind of thing. And it's not the sort of thing that like hits you over the head libertarianism-wise, but it's not something you're not going to read anywhere else. And it's a real easy topic to understand. And it was fun. I mean, so stuff like that. I mean, Chris Calton I always encourage because he would write lots of obscure articles on like, you know, this guy that really wanted to outlaw cocaine in such and such a way at such and such a time and stuff. And that's sort of history you don't really read anywhere else, or like the history of the cornflake or something like that. I mean, and bringing into, you know, how government regulation created the breakfast cereal or something like that. I like that. And it's actually hard to find that. But certain publications, which have a generally left of center slant, like The Atlantic or even sometimes The New Republic, which is horrible on foreign policy and stuff, they have some nice, really deep dive articles that I find really interesting. And I think there's just, if you read a lot of books, there's like a limitless number of topics that you can really pursue on that. But you gotta, in order to know about those weird, obscure things, you gotta like read a bunch of stuff that's not just the usual fare.
Well, one author, and it's going to sound, just bear with me for a second, but his older stuff, I thought he was a very entertaining way of talking about economic concepts. It was actually Paul Krugman. But usually it was his older books and you know his articles. And I mean now he's just a completely just partisan hack. And I mean it just his stuff isn't even really worth reading at all now, even for just getting that other little taste of it. I mean he just becomes so just delusional himself. But his old writings are very entertaining, and he would find like these real world his whole argument against about the dangers of deflation had to deal with this story about this babysitter co-op in DC where they had these coupons that they would use to trade like babysitting hours, and like there ended up being a recession because nobody wanted to trade these coupons because they wanted to make sure they had them for later. And again, I think his concept, I think there's some issues there structurally with what he was saying, but I thought he did a very good job of communicating these ideas. And he also has one of the most entertaining economic papers out there, which is like the theory of interstellar trade, which is kind of this humorous trade theory paper. So I really recommend like his book, Return to Depression Economics. Again, it's wrong, but it's useful to see that other side. And I think that there's some aspects to his writing style that I think that any good econ writer could borrow from. Just not his latest stuff.
We should probably let people go. I believe we're out of time. But I'll be up here if anybody had any additional questions.
And one last thing, also good content for us is always looking for some good econ tweets and other social media content. So again, if you're very active on Twitter and you think you've got, I'll judge how good your tweets are. I'm not going to take your word for it. But please, please feel free to hit me up if you're very active on Twitter, because I'm always looking for some easy commentary that way.
Okay, great. Well, hopefully this was useful to you. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start in just a couple of minutes, so come on in, please. Take your seats and move up front if you don't mind. We're going to start in just a couple of minutes.
We're going to be catching a shuttle, taking a plane tonight, so I'm going to be leaving here. So I just wanted to thank you so much. Word. That's awesome. Well, we appreciate it. I just thank you for everything, for the opportunity.
You guys.
Yeah, no. They're going to say whatever they're going to say.
Yeah. All right. Safe travels.
Yep.
Thanks for making it.
Yep. I'll be
This one is mine.
Just 30, 35, maybe 40 minutes. That's okay.
Depending on how many questions, depending on
Easy peasy.
hopefully.
Easy peasy.
Yeah.
You ever heard that?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, hello. Is this on? Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started in just a minute. Does anyone in the room listen to the Human Action Podcast? Have listened to it in the past? All right. Okay. So, as you know, we've changed up the format a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to stream this live. It'll be a YouTube later, but so we're going to cue the intro music, and then as it sort of fades out, I introduce it. All of you are going to applaud to the level you see fit this morning, and then we're going to get into a conversation with Dr. Stern. So, Clay, we're ready when you are, young man, and applause as the music comes out. Hello. Okay. Thank you. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to have a live audience for the Human Action Podcast this week. We're in Auburn at the tail end of Mises University, and it's great to have a live audience in front of us. And it's also great to have a good friend of ours, Dr. Liliana Stern. She teaches just across the street at Auburn University, both macro and money and banking. She actually obtained her master's degree in economics in her native country of Ukraine, in Kiev, before coming to the U.S. to study at Indiana University, where she obtained her PhD, and Auburn University hired her in the faculty here. She's also done some work with the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank as a consultant, again, in her native Ukraine. So she has a very interesting story. And although the Human Action Podcast, normally we focus on, we're not afraid of economic theory in this podcast, which I think sets us apart. My goal is to try to be the liaison between the academics and the lay audience, and to try to help a lay audience understand some of these economic concepts and simplify them and demystify them. So we get into theory and history, we get into all kinds of things, but this week we're going to get into some real talk about economics as a profession, economics as an undergraduate major, which some of you may already be or be considering, whether a PhD in economics is worth your time and effort and youth, and some other great subjects. So let's give a big round of applause to our guest.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Dr. Stern has some students here from her class, so it's good to see some Auburn faces in the crowd.
I'm not surprised by that.
Is that extra credit?
I guess, yeah. Well, they are not students anymore, but I'm glad that they came, even though they can't get any extra credit.
Well,
from
they
me,
get psychic credit for that.
I mean, it's like.
Well, you know, Peter Klein and I had a conversation a few months back, and I want to open with a very broad question. I'll get your take on it. Give us your view of the state of the profession of economics, both professional and academic. I mean, there's a lot of people at the Mises Institute and in this audience who would say that economics is not in very good shape.
Well, from my background, as Jeff told you, that I have quite unusual background because I grew up in the Soviet Union. So that's what all my students tell me, that I'm quite unusual economics professor in a way that I have the other side of the story, and I have firsthand experience growing up in socialist and communist economy, while other people who, favors this type of economic system usually just read about it. So I think this kind of make me stand apart from these people, because I think it's very different when you read about something when you experienced it and you have real life examples. So, and my take on the economic profession is that I think what I see is that unfortunately at a lot of places becoming very one-sided, and the way it's taught in American colleges, it's usually just very one-sided, and it's usually a Keynesian types of economics, which is very pro-government. So, and I try to stay away from that. So even though, I use textbooks that have Keynesian economic models, but always when I teach my class, I start discussion with students, and I give them like different perspectives on things. So I try to discuss different, directions in economics and how different school of economic thought would view a certain issue and so on. But again, going back to Jeff's question, is that I think, and it's kind of upsetting to me to see that in a lot of American colleges, it's usually the way economics is taught is very one-sided. So students are not exposed to different views of the same issue, and they are not, they are not encouraged to discuss and express their opinion and maybe disagree with things and so on.
Well, it's interesting if you talk to college professors in the sociology department, in the social sciences, certainly law faculties, intersectional studies, they consider economics departments right wing. They think that relative to other disciplines, econ professors are at least center right. And do you think they're wrong?
Yes, I think they are wrong. So that's not my observation. So I think that may be true for some schools, but majority of schools, I mean, any principles, I think majority of principles of economics textbook used in American colleges, that's just Keynesian economic model, which is government everything. So, and this is obviously, and very little role for markets.
Well, you mentioned textbooks. I think Peter Klein pointed out the other day that the Paul Samuelson textbook, which went through several editions, made him a very rich man, was at one point the most used, most assigned textbook in America. And so when you say you use Keynesian textbooks, is this coming from the administration, or is this generally what's available?
That's generally what's available. So majority of economic textbook. But again, even though I use this as my main textbook, but I make my students aware of different viewpoints, and I try to discuss, and I kind of emphasize this is how this type of economist views these issues, but there are other views on things. And, and even when we discuss, even my students maybe can chime in. So when we discuss adjustment and, business cycle, I always talk about, the usual Keynesian views that government has to do stuff, but what I say, they always stress the self-adjustment and the market adjustment. So I use this as a base framework, because if they go on to take other econ classes, they need to know that, because other people will use the Keynesian framework. But I make them aware of other, viewpoints on this issue.
Well, apart from viewpoints or particular schools of thought, let's just ask this. Are theory and history even being taught much? In other words, is everything applied economics, even at the undergraduate level? Is theory dead?
You mean economic theory?
Yeah.
Whether that?
Yes.
I don't see much economic history taught in terms of different school of economics. Again, as I said, it's mainly just one that's kind of being, everywhere, at least at the principles level. So students are not aware in most classes that there are different school of thoughts in economics. So, and maybe it depends on a professor, like I do that, but I know that most other instructors who teach principles, they just, this is economic theory. So students are not even aware that there are other school of thoughts, and that this is not the only way. That's, government has to do this and intervene, and, whenever we have an economic recession, government has to step in, or there will be the end of the world. So this is how most people teach that. So I think that students are unfortunately given only like just a very one-sided story, and this is what upsetting to me, because I think the main goal in teaching economics should be make young people, help them to think critically and being able to analyze. But if you just provide one way of thinking, there is not much room left for any analysis or critical thinking. If you just, you're just throwing, okay, this is what's going on, and you make people believe that this is the only way and this is the absolute truth, this theory. So you don't leave much room for discussion or for critical thinking, and that's not how I teach. So I teach economics. I tell my students that my main goal is to help you think critically after this class. I don't expect you all to be economics professors or anything like that, but I want you to be able to think and analyze things, and don't take everything you hear on the news, you read about as an absolute truth. I want you to be able to analyze things and look at them differently.
Well, of course, if you go to Auburn, you might have the good fortune to take a class on economic history with our own Dr. Mark Thornton, and they use a textbook in that class that was written by Bobby Aber, who was at Auburn, and also our own Bob Eklund, who is Auburn. It's an absolutely phenomenal textbook. If you look it up, we have some copies here. It's an expensive book, but it's an absolutely beautiful survey of the history of economic thought. It's almost like a reference book you can keep at your desk. And so, there is, that is still being taught, but it's being taught sporadically and here and there. When you talk about only one perspective being presented, when you hear left progressives today talk about economics, there's some kind of celebritarian economists like Paul Krugman and Noah Smith, who runs a Twitter feed called No Opinion. You might know that. My sense is that a lot of people on the left in the West today, they don't really think economics is a legitimate discipline. In other words, they don't think there's such thing as economic laws, and that economics is secondary to government, and the state can just sort of literally command the economy. And there really is no such thing as economic law. It's just what we pass as a policy matter.
A funny story about Paul Krugman. Once I ask all the time to review principal texts for for economics classes. So they send me Krugman's book, and I wrote such a bad review that the chief editor called me, and he said, "Wow, your review was so negative." And I said, "Well, you guys forgot to do a background check on me." I said, "I grew up in Soviet Union. Why are you sending me this book by?" Every single example is about government intervention. I said, every single example in his book. I said, I was just being honest. They never sent me any Krugman books for review, but he was like, well, thank you for your honesty. I said, well, whoever works for you, didn't do their job, because they obviously should have predicted that I would not like this textbook, because I grew up in that system, and this guy is just, treats government as God and solution to all problems. And I said, I was just being honest, and this is what I do with every economic text. I do my job, and I review, and I give them honest review, but that book is just really got under my skin. So they called me, and so it's like, well, that was very honest. But yeah, so I agree. To me, especially Paul Krugman, he just thinks that I actually don't know how a person with economic education can believe in that government, is essentially like a savior, and government should be everywhere. So it's just hard for me to understand how people with PhD in economics, could favor government intervention to that degree. So
a lot of our students here are undergraduate econ majors or considering it. Talk about, give us your thoughts on that. Would you recommend it as a major in general? Do you think, without going any further in school, that economics graduates are getting jobs?
Economics, of course, I will. I will say that some people may say that I'm biased because I'm an economics professor, but Again, it depends on where you go to school to study economics, but hopefully, the places you go, you'll be lucky to have professors with different backgrounds and not just like get this one-sided story that I talked about before. But in general, I just think that economics prepares you for life really well, and it's a very broad major that can, you can get jobs in various fields if you have an economics undergraduate degree. And especially our majors, we have a very small department. So we have in total like maybe 120 majors across all years. So it's very small by Auburn standards. But our students, the placement has been outstanding. So a lot of our students, I would say probably like 50% of our students go on to law schools. So this year we had Penn, we had Harvard, we have 3 students currently in Harvard Law School, we had Chicago Law School. So our program definitely prepares them well for law schools, and I think that component of critical thinking helps a lot when to prepares you well for law school. And then also we have law and economics class that we offer, and that's very valuable. So again, our students are doing great and continue on as lawyers. And a lot of them, we had a couple of students who went on to and got a joint PhD in economics and a law degree. So I think Vanderbilt and what is Georgetown, or I don't know which school in DC has this joint program, and one school in Florida. So I know of 3 schools in the United States that offer that. So, and several of our students went on to those, and essentially in 7 years you got a double PhD. So you become a lawyer and you also have PhD in econ. And this is probably a great option for those who want to do like corporate law. Also our students also, not just going to law schools, but they're getting jobs in corporate world. So we have one of my former students work at Ford Motor Company, the research department. A lot of students work in commercial banks. So I have former students, he's like vice president of regions banks, just different fields. And I think, because economics is such a general field and just, teaches you how to think and analyze things. So it prepares you for a lot of, potential careers that you may wanna choose later in your life. So definitely I would, if you're interested in economics, I would encourage you to pursue, a degree in economics, and because it prepares you well, and you can get jobs in different fields. As I tell our students that it essentially replaces all business school degrees, because a lot of students come and they have this kind of wrong perception of economics, and I don't know, I didn't obviously go to high school in this country, but that's what people tell me, that the way economics is taught in this country in high schools, public high schools, it just gives students very wrong perception of the field of economics, because it's usually taught by Coach Brian or Coach something. So, and essentially what they teach them, again, this was just taken word from my American husband. I didn't go to high school here. But what they teach them is like, your checkbook balancing and something like that. So they think that's what economics is about when they come from high school. And they think that, it's just a very dry science. So you want to be this an old, overweight man teaching some like dried up science. So this is not at all what economics is about and should be about. So, and I tell a lot of students, so when they come, usually if they take my macro class, I get a lot of kids interested in the field of economics, and they come talk to me, and I ask them, what's your major right now? They tell me it's business, finance, or accounting, or we get a lot of engineers. And they usually have no idea what they can do with economics degree later in life, whether it will get them any job. So I have to tell them what options available. And I tell them, especially with business degree, I tell them that economics essentially replaces all business degrees. And I said, if you look at the job advertisement, it will be like, requirements for some job. It will say finance degree or economics. It will be management degree or economics, marketing degree or economics, accounting degree. So it's just a very broad degree that, encompasses a lot of different fields, because I think of this critical thinking that I'm trying to teach my students and hopefully other professors.
So do you think the economics department belongs in business schools at universities, or do you think it belongs in the College of Liberal Arts?
Well, statistically, it's a 50-50 split, I think, about that in the United States. And as some of you probably know, our department has been in business school for many years, and then due to some political fights, which I don't know much about, we were moved to liberal arts. I feel like we kind of fit in better with liberal arts folks, but again, you know, if you're looking at statistics around the United States, it's 50-50. But personally, I think that it belongs, you know, with liberal arts because it's a social science. It's about human behavior. So that's my personal opinion, that we just fit in better with liberal arts, College of Liberal Arts.
Well, let's talk about people who are thinking about perhaps getting a PhD in economics. Now, I can speak anecdotally because at the Mises Institute, obviously, we know a lot of PhDs, we know a lot of university professors, we know a lot of students. So anecdotally, I think econ PhDs, like undergraduate, are a relative bright spot in terms of employment prospects. But maybe we can start by just, I'm not sure people really and truly understand how mathy things have become. In other words, a lot of what you do in your coursework to get a PhD in economics is high-level math.
Very high-end math. And, you know, when I first came to Indiana, so most graduate programs start with a math boot camp. So before you start taking classes in end of August, they tell you to arrive 2 weeks earlier, and you have to do the math boot camp.
Doesn't that sound like fun, guys? In August, a little math boot camp?
And I remember when I arrived in Indiana in 2000, it was like August 8th of 2000, so a long time ago, almost 20 years ago. And I started the boot camp. So they gave me the math books. I thought that maybe I'm in the wrong classroom. Somehow, you know, I wandered around into like a math PhD hallway or something. But yeah, so it's very, very mathematical, a lot of math and a lot of statistics. And unfortunately, and this is, I was lucky not to have professors that recognize that, and they also told us, I remember my professor who became my advisor later on, he said that you have to see economics behind every equation. Writing down a crazy equation, it's not enough. Like, you have to tell me, what does it mean? And that's what I teach my students. Okay, you wrote down this equation, but what does it mean? What implications? What policy implications? Or what? So, and this is unfortunately, I think, kind of becoming a problem with economics because it's becoming so technical that people forget about economics. I don't know, this is how you feel about it, but this is how I feel. That, yes, it uses high-end math, but sometimes people just, you know, they don't go beyond the math, the mathematical equations. They don't try to understand the economics behind all of that. And this is what I try to avoid when I teach, especially my intermediate class. You know, if you write down some model, I always ask my students, how Jason can confirm, what does this mean? Like, you got this result. Now tell me, what does this mean? So I don't want them just to see numbers. I want them able to, you know, be able to understand the economics behind these numbers. But unfortunately, that's not how everybody's teaching, and especially at the level like PhD. Sometimes we see that they just ask you, okay, prove that this equals to that. But where is the economics? So a lot of people forget about economics behind that. They're just so involved into this high-end mathematical equation or statistical equations.
But I guess that one point here is realistically, if you're going to consider a PhD from an American program, you're probably going to have your chops in math. I mean, would you agree? You're just going to have that aptitude. So it's something to think about.
So we have our department actually have 2 undergraduate tracks, and one of them is called quantitative econ. So it's preparing students for graduate career, and those students have to take high-level math classes like real analysis and other classes from the math department because we want them to succeed. If they decide, you know, to get master's degree or PhD, we don't want them to feel like lost and not be able to do that math. But yeah, that's correct. Like, if if you're not too good with math, like you can't, you cannot do well in a PhD program. It's all very, you know, high-level mathematics and statistical analysis as well.
Well, it's interesting that Dr. Stern mentions saying to her students, okay, you've got this equation, what does it mean? Because in a sense, we've come full circle because writers like Mises were derided as so-called literary economists. Because if you look at Mises, there's no charts and graphs and equations in any of his work. And then we, you know, fast forward to the latter half of the 20th century, we had economics reaching the point where a lot of people literally thought any economic proposition ought to be able to be expressed as an equation, almost a pure mathematical model. And now now we discover that sometimes getting the math right doesn't give you the understanding behind it.
Well, it's just how I am doing that, and I said like a few professors doing, but a lot of people, especially like young generation economists, they just mathematicians, in my opinion. You know, they write down the model, they don't really understand. I had friends like that, they were just so technical. And if you ask them like, but what are the implications of this result? What will happen? Can you predict what will happen with the economy? They don't know. I was like, I don't know, I proved that this equal to that, but they don't understand. And again, and I think the whole field is becoming more and more technical, and this is kind of, I think that maybe, I don't want to say dangerous, but I just hope that it's not a new trend, that the economists are so involved in this, you know, high-level math and statistics that they forget about economics.
And to be fair, all that math didn't help us much in 2008. It
Nothing
didn't predict
could predict anything.
Yeah. So I want to ask you this. You know, a criticism that a lot of us have of the profession is that academic publishing seems to be a racket. In other words, advancement in that field, just like almost all academic fields, is oftentimes based on publishing. So people write obscure articles in obscure journals, and this is the path to advancement in their career rather than being dedicated to teaching. So give us your thoughts on publishing.
Yeah, I think I agree with that point, and I think the kind of teaching has been de-emphasized at a lot of places, and again, this is very upsetting to me because I'm a very dedicated teacher. Hopefully my students will meet like this, but I spend a lot of time and effort preparing for my classes, and even at my department, especially the newest hire that we have, they completely devalue teaching and de-emphasize. They think that their job is just to sit and, you know, just write their papers, and they don't think teaching is important. Like, to me, being a professor, teaching is the most important part. Like, if you want to advance the field of economics, and this should be the most important part, but not, I mean, research should be important as well, but what I see at a lot of places that, you know, teaching is being completely devalued, and people just, you know, teach the same stuff for 20 years, like they spend 5 minutes preparing for their classes, you know, use lecture notes. You know, when things change and evolve every day, they are talking about some models or some stuff that was going on 10 years. But this is all obsolete. You can't use this textbook that was, you know, relevant 20 years ago today, because things are changing every day. And I've been teaching principles of macro class since I joined the economics department in 2006, but every semester I change my lecture notes. And every class, before I go teach, I update it with the newest data available. I think you have to make it relevant, because what's the point of teaching economics if I talk about I talk about what was going on in the 70s and 80s, but I cannot give my students and discuss, you know, a recession of 1970s and not discuss what's going on today. But a lot of people, because they think teaching is not important, they just, I think, don't put enough effort and don't emphasize teaching that much, so they think like, oh, I should spend 80% of my time doing my own research rather than, you know, preparing lecture notes and updating all the data.
Well, and let's not forget, a lot of these people are paid by taxpayers to do this. And I mean, and this isn't just economics, this is all academia. I mean, I think a lot of us in this room, we get the perception that for academics, students are almost a nuisance. even the university that funds them is almost a nuisance. They exist to be this brilliant academic who's just supported financially, however. But I mean, honestly, I think that's reached scandalous proportions in the U.S. Bad teaching.
I find my students very often very surprised that I have an open door policy, and I'm always there to help them, give advice, and sometimes just not even related to my class, but about their future career. And they all tell me, "You're so nice and so helpful." I said, "That's my job. You guys are paying me for that." And then I figured that not all people like that, So they, like you said, they find students irritating and like you're disrupting their day if you come by to ask a question or ask for help with the homework. And this is what I also find upsetting. And I don't understand why is it this way and when things changed, like was it recently or was it 20 years ago or is it some universities' policies that kind of de-emphasize teaching and put more stress on research? I don't know where it all happened, but this is not how I view my job. So I think, my main goal is to teach classes, and that's why I put a lot of effort into preparing for my classes.
Well, it sounds like a system that's ripe for disruption. I'm sure a lot of people in this room have read Brian Kaplan's book on the subject, but I want to touch on a related topic, which is tenure. I think a lot of us understand conceptually the idea of tenure is a good one. In other words, people in academic posts should be able to pursue research or truth or writing and write whatever they believe to be true without fear of losing their income as a result of it. But the flip side of that is you get arrogance and laziness.
That people, so they guarantee, so tenure, I don't know how many of you guys are aware of the tenure system and what that means. So tenure essentially means, lifetime employment. So usually, most schools, they give you 7 years and you have certain requirements, depends on department and university. So you get, a certain number of papers you have to publish, and they look at your teaching. I get teaching evaluations, and then you either pass or you fail. And then you get, if you get your tenure, it means lifetime employment. And this is what you usually have, that, people get lazy and they don't change their lecture notes for 30 years. And today they will be talking about what was going on in the 80s, without discussing the current economic policy and what's going on in the world. So this is a big, I think, flip side of that, that people are just not motivated unless they personally motivated. Like for me, of course, I'm getting paycheck from Auburn University for teaching my classes, but I really enjoy teaching. So this brings me joy to work with young people and, be asked questions, and then, have discussions with young people and listen to different opinions. I really enjoy that. So I am a tenured professor, but I still, I believe I still put the same effort into teaching my classes as I did before I had tenure, but not all people like that. And this is the big negative side of, tenure in an academic profession.
So talk about your students themselves. Do you feel that they come out of high school prepared to do undergraduate economics?
As I mentioned before, most students come with a very wrong perception of what economics is as a field. Because I was taught by a baseball coach or football coach at high school, and they were just.
Do you think that is the case, that economics is sort of shunted off to the side in high school, and it's not given very serious?
I mean, that's my perception. That again, I don't know. It's just I don't have a first-hand experience, but that's what I hear more and more, because I was trying to get down to the where does this problem? Why do they think economics is this way? It's completely wrong. And then I think just the way it's taught at high schools. So they come to my class, most of them just very discouraged and unmotivated. So they expect, economics class to be very boring and something for most of them, like all business majors had to take my principles of macro class. So they just think, okay, I'll sign up for this huge lecture, lecture hall class, which mine is, and just disappear in the crowd. I'll sit through her class and shop on internet or play video games, and get my C or my B and be done with it. And it just, it's so boring. And a lot of people think that it's hard. I don't know, they probably heard that we use math in economics, and math is usually the scary word, or graphs, even scarier. So a lot of students intimidated by that. So I get these two, but usually the perception of economics is very negative. That's my experience. So when I come to my class. And when I start lecturing in that big class in Louder here, which is usually have 260, 290 students, they're usually very surprised when I start walking between the aisles and ask questions, and they're like, what does she want? She's just supposed to read off PowerPoints and we all sleep and go home. But then they kind of get interested, I think, and start participating. So I usually have the front row people more motivated, and they start asking questions. But then even in the middle of the room, some people perk up and like, oh, this is something cool she's, talking about, or she's asking for our opinion. But at the beginning, the perception is very negative, I think, of economics as a field. But by the end of the semester, I like to think that I have a lot of people that I change their perception of economics, and they get a lot more interested. And I see a lot of students from that principal class taking my intermediate class because they want to know more. And I always have at least, a handful of students switching major to economics after they take my principles of macro class, because they're like, oh, that's actually something very cool. It can be very useful, if you understand it, and something that we can apply to everyday life, and teaches us how to make decisions and so on.
So your principles class is more than 200 students?
Yes.
That's pretty challenging. That's pretty daunting, I would say, for both the students and
usually
the professor.
260, between 260 and 290.
Wow, that's a huge class. And so how does that work? I mean, you're going to have a range of interests in that class. You're going to have a range of aptitude, a range of effort. Do you view it as you reach who you can reach in the class?
Yeah, so I usually just, the front half of the room are the one who range probably from quite interested to a little bit interested, somewhat interested, and the back of the room, I just ignore them. But I see people moving to the front from the back of the room, so I was like, okay, I've done my job. I see that person is trying to move closer, and they start asking me questions. But in a big class like that, you said, you have a whole range of interest, and like some people, it doesn't matter what I do, what I talk about, they're just not interested. They're not interested in anything. They're probably just, interested in the next party they're going to. But that changes as they mature, and I had some students that would take my principles class and like barely got a C, and then I see them in my intermediate class. I had one kid like that. He was a strong B, and then he take advanced macro class, he was an A, and then he went on to get master's degree, and he was the best student. So I just was very happy to see him mature. And so he went from like no interest whatsoever, just got a passing grade, to becoming this outstanding student. And this is like what makes me very happy. If I see these kids who just there because, their academic advisor told them that's a required class, so they have to be there. But then I see them like genuinely being interested in a subject. That's when I feel, I feel like I've done my job. They're not just doing this for a grade or for their degree, but they want to know more. They're curious about the field, so they want to learn.
How do you think we might go about getting more Austrian content into curricula? How we might go about getting more Austrian or Austrian-friendly profs into academia? Because it seems like, honestly, it seems like we do better with lay audiences and getting people to read Mises or Hayek or Rothbard on their own, which is something we've all done outside of the assigned coursework. But how do we, you say there's basically a Keynesian perspective taught. How should we go about ameliorating this?
I think probably one way would be if someone writes a book, which, principles textbook that includes like these different school, of economic thoughts, including Austrian, so it's not all just Keynesian. And then
Just write your own textbook.
yeah, and then let people adopt it, and I think it would be quite popular. It should be, again, not very challenging and very intuitive, so you always have to think about the level of your audience, right? So you can't have something like very complicated, but just a basic economic textbook, and that just has these different perspectives, not just Keynesian, including Austrian, so that students could learn about, this is Keynesian economics is not the only type of economics. And this is what they call economics. Usually means Keynesian.
Right. Well, we could have a whole nother show about the textbook publishing racket. So we have time for one last question. I want to ask about the S word, socialism, which seems to be looming in our country in some senses. Generally speaking, Auburn kids are considered maybe slightly more conservative than kids at some universities. But give us your thoughts on this. Are young people and your students in particular, are they gullible about socialism? Do they understand it? What are their thoughts?
Yeah, probably compared to other schools like, I don't know, Duke or Harvard or Berkeley, Auburn students a little bit more conservative, but I still see a lot of students in my class that are very pro-socialism. And usually those students are very brainwashed, so they don't really understand what socialism is. So, because when I ask, when I kind of initiate discussion and when I hear their arguments, like why do they favor socialism, they don't know much. And I was like, you cannot be in favor of something if you don't even know what that is. So this is what I find. But I actually had a lot of students that, very pro-social in my class. And I was happy to see that by the end of the semester, even my intermediate class, a lot of them changed their minds, or at least they are not so stuck on the idea. So it's just like this ideology, and they don't understand what it is, but they think that it's better than market economy. And I was like, no, you cannot favor something without knowing what it is or providing argument why this is better than market economy or any other kind of economy. So at least, and I've been able to convince at least a handful of students that socialism is not such a great idea. Maybe providing my personal examples, growing up in Soviet Union and just initiating discussions in my class. But in most cases, what I find with students, it's kind of, I don't know, it's like their religion. They don't understand what it is. And usually they are very aggressive and they don't really want to, and they are very defensive, or they don't even want to discuss it. They'll just say, it's better. And when I ask them, why is it better? Can you tell me why is it better? They can't say anything. So they usually start attacking me on something else. I was talking about, and I was just discussing something in my intermediate class about normal good and inferior good, and I was just giving an example, just random example about some types of good that change from being inferior to normal. So inferior good is something that you consume more when your income goes down. So for example, used car is an inferior good. So I was talking about breastfeeding, and I said, that's a very interesting research. And I said, I'm a mother, I have 3 children. So I gave them, and I guess they were all very young, so they can relate to that. But some girl immediately started attacking me, and I said, so what I was telling them about is that breastfeeding became a normal good. It used to be inferior in the 70s, so poor women used to breastfeed children because formula was expensive. Now it's all changed. Mothers who have advanced graduate degrees, PhDs and masters, 90% of mothers breastfeed their children. while poor people use formulas. So I was just discussing, why do you think this good flipped? She was attacking. I thought she was gonna scratch my eyes out. And she said, because poor mothers, unlike you, they did not have a luxury of their own office, like pumping you milk and breastfeeding your child. They have to work 3 jobs, minimum wage jobs. And she was not even like, that's not what I wanted to discuss. She was just immediately attacking me. So that's what I find. And with some other discussions that we had is, they're just very angry. It's almost kind of like a religion for them, and they believe it. I believe in God, right? And that is like, I believe in socialism. But when you ask them why, you ask for more questions, they can't provide any arguments. They start usually attacking you. But anyway, so that the girl, she was a poli-science major. She just graduated with a degree in economics. And she told me, that my class changed her, and then she decided to drop her poli-science major, and she actually graduated with, and she went, I think she's going to law school somewhere. But when I met her in my class, she was just very angry, She was just, anything I said, she would just attack me, because she kind of feel that my viewpoints were different than hers, and because when I introduce myself, I tell them, well, I grew up in Soviet Union, so given my background, I am more pro-market than pro-government. You guys can get that. I don't belong to any political parties or anything like that. And I think from that moment, she was just, she did not like me at all, and she was just very aggressive, but that changed throughout the semester. So anyway, and she graduated with a degree in economics, and she's like, well, thank you so much for putting up with me and, starting the discussions. But so I find a lot of young people like that, they just, they defend it, and they don't know what that really is, because it's almost like a religion for them.
Well, we have to end on that note. That's Peak America 2019, woke 20-year-olds explaining socialism to somebody from the former Soviet Union. Big thanks for Dr. Liliana Stern.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you can take your seats, we're going to get started. We've got really an absolute treat for all of you. I know, let's hear some applause for people who are familiar with comedian Dave Smith. All right. You know, what can you say about Dave? Not only does he take 2 days out of his life, he's got a young baby at home, but he's an entrepreneurial guy with this comedy, very hardworking. He's got a podcast via the Gas Digital Network, which is really the new model, selling subscriptions. Just a fantastic guy, a thorough Misesian Rothbardian, actually very well read, and we so much appreciate him making the time. So please welcome Dave Smith.
Oh, what's up, Mises University? How is everybody, huh? Oh, what an honor to be back here. How about another round of applause for Jeff Deist, everybody, the president. The only president I will refer to as our president, Jeff Deist. It's so great to be back here for all of you guys, the Jews, Catholics, autistic people. We got the whole gamut right here in front of us. It's my honor once again for the second year to keep my title of being the dumbest person to ever speak at a Mises University event by far. There is no competition. I was very happy to take a couple days out to come down here. This is the pilgrimage to Mecca for all of us, and I'm around so many of my heroes, so I love being here. I had a big year. As Jeff said, me and my wife had our first baby this year, so that was, thank you very much. All right. I didn't do that much work, so, it was mostly her. It is, I know a lot of you guys are young, but you'll have kids someday, and it is unfair what women have to go through. It's unbelievable. It really gives you an appreciation for women. Having a baby, it's like, men, you have one very small part at the beginning, and it's pretty fun, I'll be honest. And then it's just 9 months of your wife being like uncomfortable and sick, and it's, they go through a lot. It's tough. Women really have a beef with the system, and I don't mean like the patriarchy, biology. Like, you have a real beef with biology. Your problem is with God. Like, those people who are like, God hates gays or whatever. I don't think God hates gays. Have you seen gays? They're having a great time. God hates women. He is mad at you guys. You should not have eaten that apple or whatever it is that you did. He's got a beef with you. Pregnancy is very hard, and it's awkward. I don't know. It's like, I know Jeff's a father, and some of the staff here have kids. It's weird when your wife is pregnant, because it's all about her. And you're just kind of there, like she's the star of the show, and you're a Yankee fan, and she's Derek Jeter, and you're just like, can I get you something to drink, Derek Jeter? And then you're like, why is Derek Jeter furious at me? I don't know why Derek Jeter's yelling at me all day today. I mean, I'm a fan. I'm a season ticket holder, really. So you should show me a little bit of respect, but I don't get any. But it's amazing. I love being a father. It's the absolute best. It's the best thing I've ever done. It's a strange relationship you have with your baby, because you love them more than anything, and they make you happier than you've ever been, but they don't do anything for you. Like, you do all of it. They contribute nothing. They don't bring any money in. They don't even they don't go like, hey, thanks. I appreciate it, And they yell at you. Like, most of my day is just my baby yelling at me, but I still love her more than anything. Like, she actually she's the night before I got here, she kept me and my wife up till 5 in the morning, just screaming at us. She was a terrorist. She's such a terrorist. I'm surprised the CIA isn't sending her weapons. That's how much she yelled at us that I thought that one might go over well with this crowd. But she yells, and it's hard to describe to people who aren't parents, because you're just happy, but it doesn't make sense on paper. Like, it's like, how's being a father going? And you're like, oh my God, it's unbelievable. And they're like, what's it like? And you're like, well, I'm exhausted, and I'm constantly terrified something's gonna happen to her, and I'm covered in spit up and poop. And it's just great. I don't know, like it's really, really great. And they're like, that sounds awful. Like, no. Did I mention I was terrified? Did I not? No, it's good. And then my wife, she had the baby. And then she like got right back in shape. Like she started going to the gym every day as soon as her doctor cleared her to. And my wife's like, she's beautiful, and she got thin right away again, which is awesome. But you're not allowed to act like it's awesome. You have to act like you don't care either way. But really, you're like, all right, thank God. That was good. Like, that was so good that you did that. But you have to just act like you don't care. Like, whatever, fat, thin, doesn't matter to me, you know? It's really, but it's a health issue more than anything else. So you can't, like, my wife, she told me right away after she had the baby, she was like, I'm gonna get my body back. I'm determined to get it back. I was like, yeah, it's whatever, you know, like whatever you wanna do. That's totally fine. I will drive you to the gym every day though, if that's what you wanna do. I will pay for the membership. I'll even lock the doors in the morning if we need to. Anyway, it was great. To me, it was the right time to have a kid. I just felt like, you know, everything in our society is stable. Everyone's getting along with each other. Now's the time to bring a child into the world. Now that the future is on steady ground. And man, what a world we live in. Like, it's always been crazy, but it's just, now everything's upside down. Everything. Like, it's just, Trump is still president. I still kind of can't believe it. Like every day, you know, you turn on the news and you're like, oh, I wasn't dreaming. This is real. This is all still. Do you guys follow him on Twitter? You have to. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you're missing out on some great entertainment. Like I don't even know why I do this anymore. He's the best comedian in the country, Donald Trump. No one's funnier than that guy. He tweeted out from the POTUS account. He tweeted out, he goes, I forget the exact words, but he goes, the lying media is trying to ruin your favorite president. And then after your favorite president, he put in parentheses, me. And like even Trump was a little bit worried that you might not realize, like he was like, we're talking me here, like some Fox News viewers were gonna be like, what, Reagan? He's like, no, me, we're talking about me. And he's just trolling all of it, you know. It's like you watch the news and, you know, they're like, well, his approval numbers aren't doing good, and the whole media is against him, and the Democrats are against him, and the Republicans are against him, and you're like, oh man, this guy might be in trouble. And then you see the Democratic debate, and you're like, okay, he's gonna win, for sure. He's absolutely going to win. There's no question. Donald Trump is getting reelected. None of those people are gonna be able to handle him. That's, you know, he just gives you a nickname. And then it's over. And then you can never look at that person the same. Like, I was just watching that debate, and I was like, Joe Biden is sleepy. Like, as someone who has a 7-month-old baby, I know sleepy when I see sleepy. Joe Biden needs a nap. This guy is, and he's Elizabeth Warren. Oh, he already ruined her. Like, she's already he trolled her into taking a DNA test. I mean, who would have known Donald Trump would be this brilliant? He trolled her. He goes, I'll give Elizabeth Warren $1 million if she takes a DNA test. And she took it. And then the reporters came up to Trump and they were like, so she took the test, are you gonna give her $1 million? And he was like, no. I'm not giving her any money. And they were just like, okay, I guess, you know. And she didn't do great on the test. She did not. She did not have a great test. I know there's a lot of people here who were just taking some tests. You couldn't have done worse than Elizabeth Warren did on her test, so just don't. I mean, she didn't get a 0, but she did not pass. She did not come close to passing. She was like 1/1000th Native American. That's not enough to call yourself Native American. Like, and this is true, okay? My wife, she took a 23andMe test, and she is 1% Northern African. I know, I almost left her, but I was like, I don't know if we're gonna be able to make this work anymore. No, I didn't, but she's 1% Northern African, that's true. So my daughter is 0.5% Northern African, okay? So fine, Elizabeth Warren, she can be an Indian, but then I'm raising a black girl, okay? So if we all get to play by the, don't laugh, you have no idea the challenges raising a black girl. In this racist society that we live in, that's your white privilege right there. You have no idea what it's like. I have to talk to her about the police every day, and she's only 7 months, so it's cool, but Elizabeth Warren, none of them can win. Bernie Sanders isn't going anywhere. His message got tired. People are over it now. You even see people on the left, they're like, yeah, I know, it's the 1%. How much can you demonize the 1% when you just jumped into it, Bernie Sanders? It's not so bad, is it? Imagine, you almost have to respect what a brilliant capitalist Bernie Sanders is, don't you? He made $1 million writing a book about how evil it is to make $1 million. God bless the free market. I mean, that is just incredible. But none of them can beat Trump. None of them can. At the end of all of this, at the end of all this theater, you got to get on a stage with Donald Trump one-on-one and debate Donald Trump. How do you do that? I couldn't do it. I'd be 3 questions in, I'd be like, vote for this guy. I don't know what to tell you. You remember when Hillary Clinton tried? And Hillary Clinton would just try to say these like rehearsed politician talking points. She'd be like, the rhetoric of my opponent is just reckless. And Donald Trump would be like, your husband's a rapist. And she was like, Jesus. Like, what? What did you say? And then it's still a debate, so the moderators would be like, Hillary, you have 30 seconds to respond. So it was like, respond to my husband's a rapist? Like, I don't know. I've asked him to stop. I don't know what to tell you. He keeps flying around with Jeffrey Epstein all over the place. I think, yeah. Too soon? All right. Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know. Every now and then you could just look at someone's face and be like, yeah, I think they're guilty. I'll tell you, there's some shady stuff going on with that Jeffrey Epstein. I was watching I watch MSNBC to get angry, and I was watching them, and they were reporting like as information was coming in, and they were like the FBI raided Jeffrey Epstein's home, and they found a bunch of pictures of young girls, and then they just reported this like it was meaningless. They go, and they also found a passport. A Saudi passport with a different name and his picture on it. That's silly. And then they just move on. And you're like, no, that's a little bit more than silly. That's interesting. And, he's just saying. He's one of those Saudi Mossad agents. Anyway, moving on. Sorry. Come on. If I can't talk to you guys about this, we're gonna. Everything's so upside down. It's a hilarious world to live in. Trump is president. Bill Cosby's a convicted rapist. If I had asked you, like 20 years ago, if I had said Donald Trump and Bill Cosby, one of these men is going to be a convicted rapist, the other will be president of the United States of America, we all would have gotten that test wrong. Can you imagine if someone just woke up out of a coma today and they were like, what's going on? And like, well, you may want to stay laying down for this one. Things have gotten weird. Now Trump's picking a fight with the Squad. That's, the Squad, these 4 crazy people. It's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar and the other 2. The other 2 who I think are just like hanging out, like they're just their friends or something. I don't know. It's kind of funny to me. I like the Squad. I mean, I don't like them. They're insane communists. But I kind of like them existing because no one else knows how to handle them. Like even Nancy Pelosi was like, you need to shut up in public. Like you are embarrassing all of us. And then Trump started fighting with them. And that Ilhan Omar woman, she'll just say stuff. And it's always interesting when there's a politician who'll just say, she said Israel is hypnotizing the world. And then, which is just factually accurate. And that's just, you can be offended all you want to, but as she said, she goes, there's a whole lot of Jews in this country who have dual loyalty to Israel and America, and the whole media was like, you cannot say that. It is anti-Semitic and hurtful and obviously true. So we don't want that getting out there to anyone. It was like Ben Shapiro and people like that. He was so furious at her. He was like, this is the most unbelievable thing I've ever heard, that this woman would say this. And then like his next segment was how the BDS movement is evil. And you're like, I think you're proving her right. Even that AOC, she'll say like all these things, she's like, America is a white supremacist country and, whatever, we need a Green New Deal. And then she goes, and we should eliminate the Department of Homeland Security. And I was like, you got me interested on that last one, lady. I'll be honest, that last one, there's a point to that. There's at least a good point to that. But it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun to watch it play out. Because man, when Donald Trump gets reelected, I mean, if you think it's crazy now, they're gonna lose their minds when Donald Trump, they're not gonna be able to handle this one. I don't know, I don't think Putin did it is even gonna work at that point. I think there's gonna be, I can't wait to see what they come up with next. I'm just excited to be surprised. So Donald Trump, have you seen him? He's back in campaign mode now. There's nothing better. I thought I would be over it at this point. I thought I wouldn't still be laughing, but it's just still so hilarious. Even like policies I don't completely agree with, I just want to be a part of with Donald Trump. He's like, who's going to pay for the wall? And I'm at home like, Mexico! And then I'm like, no, seriously, we shouldn't build a wall. It's probably not a good idea. I don't really want to, but it was hard. He has a way of selling things. Like even when Trump first came out and he was like, we're going to build a wall and Mexico is going to pay for it. It's pretty hard to be against that. They're like, what? I'm going to be the jerk who doesn't want a free wall? Like, all right, it's free. Let's get, sure. Mexico. What else is Mexico buying us? But they're just so much fun. That's how I know he's going to win. He's having fun. Have you seen those people? Like, even when they were getting so upset, they're like, they were chanting, send them back, or whatever. It's like the Democrats don't understand what fun is anymore. That was like a room full of people having a good time. I know the left, like, you're not allowed to have a good time anymore, but it's Donald Trump's having a great time, the audience is having a great time. There's never been a politician like him. Have you seen his public speeches? Every politician in the history of my life, they give scripted speeches, they're boring robots, and they say exactly what they planned on saying. They focus group test every line, and they make sure they never say anything that might offend the audience they're in front of. They just stick to the script. And then there's Trump, and he just goes. He gets up there, and he's just like, look, we're gonna freestyle this thing. Like, I'm just spitballing. You ever listen to a Trump speech? Donald Trump will say this in every speech, and he says it multiple times every speech. Donald Trump will just go, what else? Because he doesn't even know what else he's gonna talk about in that speech. He's just like, what else? We'll figure it out. And then like people yell stuff from the audience. Like he'll be like, what else? And then someone's like, China. And he's like, China. All right. And then he talks about China for 20 minutes. And you're like, I don't even think we were going to talk about China today if that guy didn't yell it out. But now I think we're in a trade war. I don't know. Like he's launching wars on Twitter. He's just like, it's like hashtag Iran. We're going to bomb you. Like, what? Is that a declaration? It's the closest to a declaration of war we've had. I don't know. And like, I hate him, but they make you root for him. It's this weird dynamic. Like, I'll like tweet a bunch of things in a row just making fun of all the people who hate Trump, and then they're like, oh, Dave's such a Trump supporter. And I'm like, I think he should be tried for war crimes. He's just a hilarious war criminal. I don't know. We can walk and chew gum, can't we? The whole thing's crazy. And now I gotta actually worry. I used to be like one of those libertarians who was like rooting for the crash. Like, I can't wait for the crash to come. But now I got a daughter, and I'm like, let's make it not such a bad crash, if possible. That'd be good. I got to deal with things I didn't have to deal with before. I got to deal with Obamacare now. I never had health insurance in my 20s. Never did it. Just rolled the dice. And, probably not the best thing to do, but worked out pretty well. What are you going to do? You gamble and you win. You don't regret it. So I never had health care. Then I have a kid. Now I have to do that. I have to have health care for the whole family. And it is a nightmare. Obamacare is just the worst thing ever. Okay, this is a true story. So this is like 2 months ago. We were switching pediatricians. So I called my health insurance company to make sure that the pediatrician we were going to was in network, because it said it on the website, but you never know. Sometimes those things are outdated. So I called my health insurance company, and I was like, I just want to make sure we could take my daughter to this pediatrician, that we're covered. And she goes, okay, I can check on that for you, no problem. And then she goes, okay, I see here that your daughter's health insurance has been canceled, and she's no longer on your plan. And I was like, okay, that's way worse than what I thought we were going to be talking about. Like, I did not see that coming at all. And I was like, wait, what? What do you mean? At the time, she's like 5 months old. I was like, you have 5-month-olds? Health insurance is canceled? Like, why did that happen? And she's like, they were canceled by the state exchange. And I was like, why? And they go, we have no idea. They don't tell us. They just canceled her insurance. And I was like, but I got billed this month. Like, I paid for it this month. Why are you charging me for it if I don't have health insurance? And she goes, I agree with you. You shouldn't have been charged this month. And I was like, well, I'm glad we're on the same page with that. Like, I'm glad we have the same ethical standards here, that probably. But I was furious because I'm like, you didn't even, like, I was like, why didn't you call me or email me or something? Like, why wouldn't you let me know this was happening? Like, it's not cable. Like, this is a 5-month-old's health insurance, and you just canceled it without even giving me a call. By the way, cable gives you like 10 calls before they'll cancel. You're 2 days late on your Spectrum bill. They're like, we're checking in. Everything okay? Like, are you? But health insurance just like cut you right. So they were like, you got to call the state, because they're the ones who know. So it's like hours of getting through to the state.gov system. So I get to them, and I'm furious at this point because it's 5 hours later. And so I was like, why would you cancel my baby's health insurance without even letting me know? And he goes, no, we did let you know. Did you check your inbox? And I was like, yeah, I check my email every day. And he goes, no, not your email. Did you check the inbox of the account that you created on the newyork.gov.health thing when you? And I was like, what? No, what am I, a serial killer? Of course I don't check that. I don't even remember that I created an account. I just bought health insurance from you once. What? Yeah, you're right. Every morning I wake up and go, oh, I wonder if there's any updates to my. So anyway, they figure it out. They're like, oh, it was. So anyway, the whole thing was that he was like, well, we told you when you first signed up that when your daughter gets her Social Security card, you have to send it in. And I was like, yes, I did send it in. I sent it into my insurance company. And they go, yeah, so you have to send it into your insurance company and you have to send it into the state. So that's what happened. So they canceled it. So I was like, okay, well, I'll send you the card. And they go, okay, we can re-enroll you in the same plan. But we just have to ask you a few questions. I'm not making this up. These are the questions that they asked me about my daughter. By the way, the answer to every single one of these questions is she's a baby. So a list of questions that the state asks you before you can get your baby enrolled in health care again. So question number 1, has her employment status changed since the last time you enrolled her? And I was like, yeah, she got a big promotion at the job. Things are going really good. Bringing in the big bucks now. No, they go, is she incarcerated? Real questions that they asked me about. I was like, yeah, she started running with a pretty rough crowd around 3 months. We tried, at that point, it's really out of her and her mother's hands. So again, it's just like questions on and on like that. And then at the end of all of it, they're like, congratulations, you have the same health care you had at the beginning of the day. And I was like, you know what? This might not be the best system. I'm not sure. I'm not sure this is working out super well. So that's why they were so, I guess that's why people wanted to repeal that thing. I don't know. Now they want a Medicare for all plan. That's the big thing that the Democrats are pushing, Medicare for all. Bill de Blasio, he's my problem. He said the other day in a speech that under his Medicare for all, that gender reassignment surgery would be covered. He just wanted to clear that up in case anybody didn't think that would be taken care of by the taxpayer. And you look at it and you're like, are you trying to be president of Portland? Like, how do you think this is gonna play in the rest of the country? As literally all Donald Trump has to do is go, weirdo, and they're like, he makes a good point. I don't know. It's a weird, weird world. It is a strange world that we're living in. I don't know. Anyway, this is what's nice about coming to places like this. You get to be around, normal people who, by today's standards, are freaks. You're all a bunch of freaks, but you're the people who kind of get it and have a good head on your shoulder. You're the best hope for the future. What I'm saying is we're screwed. But the point is, I'm rooting for you guys. This is the type of show I love coming to. Right before I was here, I was up in Canada, that socialist country, and I was up in Canada at the socialist country that I think scores higher than us on the Freedom Index. But and I was up there, and I was staying at this hotel. It's the Radisson in Toronto, and I go there, and I was I went to check into the hotel, and the woman behind the desk, I walk up to the hotel to check in, and she points at me, and she goes, "Are you in the group?" And I was like, "I don't know what group. Like, I'm here with my friend Rob, who's opening for me. We're a group, technically." And I was like, "No, we're not in the group. We're just trying to check in." And she was like, "Well, we can't check you in yet. You have to wait another hour." So we left, and we come back, and then there was this guy behind the desk, and we're walking up to the desk, and he goes, "Are you in the group?" And I was like, "No, I'm not in the group. This is a hotel check-in desk. I'm about to tell you who I am. Like, I'm going to give you ID and stuff." So anyway, it was really weird, and he's like, "Let me see if we can check you in now." And then the same woman from before, she came back out to the desk, and she goes, "Are you in the group?" And I was like, "Lady, you know I'm not in the group, all right? We already talked about this. So what are we doing here?" And then she was like, "Okay, sorry, we can check you in. There is a little problem. I see here that you reserved a hotel for 4 days with 2 beds. All we have is a room with 1 bed. Is that going to be an issue?" And I was like, "Well, I'm here with my friend Rob, and I'm not really trying to take this relationship to the next level. So yes, that's going to be an issue. Like, I need a room with 2 beds." And we're arguing for a minute, and then she goes, "Well, look, this is the only room we have, but we can send up a cot. Is that okay?" Now, I should tell you, at this comedy show that I'm doing, I'm headlining the show, and my friend Rob is opening for me. So I know Rob's sleeping in the cot, all right? That's the point. Like, I know this is Rob sleeping in the cot, but I still had to pretend like I was a little bit upset for him, but really, I'm like, I'm fine. I don't care if Rob sleeps in the cot. So I was like, "What? It was supposed to be 2 beds, whatever, give us the cot." And we go up to the room. So we go up to the hotel room, and about 5 minutes later, there's a knock on the door. I go to the door, there's a Mexican guy with a cot. Mexican dude and a cot. And this is a Mexican guy in Canada. So, like, he's illegally crossed multiple borders to make it to this job up there. At that point, I'm like, God bless you, you know? I think by the time you pass the second border illegally, it's like double jeopardy. I don't know. I know that's not what double jeopardy means, but, you know, you're cool. So he has the cot. So I gave him like a couple dollars, probably like $1 million to him, and I took the cot. So we take the cot, and I was like, "Thank you," but he didn't really speak the language, but I think he got it. And we take the cot in, and so we have the cot, we have our bed. 5 minutes later, there's another knock on the door, and it's another Mexican guy with another cot. And so now I'm like, no, it's okay. We already got the cot. We don't need, like, a second cot doesn't help the situation at all. My friend's Rob, he's not going to sleep on one cot with his feet up on another cot. Like, So we were like, no. But this Mexican guy, he doesn't speak English, so he doesn't know what I'm saying. But I'm like, no. And he's like, see. And I'm like, no. And then he just gets this, like, infuriated thing where he's like, "I was supposed to deliver this, and I don't know, I'm gonna get in trouble." But I'm like, "Well, we don't have room for another cot. Sorry." So I just won't take it. And I come back, and I'm like, "Oh, no, I guess they tried to send another cot." So I'm not making any of this up, by the way. 5 minutes later, there's another knock on the door. And I was like, if this is another Mexican with a cot, I'm gonna lose my mind. So I open the door. Completely true story, I swear. It's 2 Mexican guys with 2 cots. And a woman wearing a blazer that says, "I'm a hotel manager." Like, even if you just saw this woman walking down the street in that blazer, you'd be like, "I bet she's a hotel manager." It was a weird blue color. Anyway, so I open the door, and she points at me, and she goes, "Are you in the group?" And I was like, am I in like a sci-fi novel right now? Like, what the hell is going on? Like, I was just getting furious. I was like, what do you mean, am I in the group? What do you get? Are you going, like, this is a hotel. You came to my room. You know who's in here. Are you just going door by door and asking them if they're in the group? And we don't need any more cots. What the hell is going on? Like, and I was like, what? No, we're not in the group. And I swear to God, what she said to me next was the most appalling thing I have ever heard in my life. She goes, we're gonna need that cot back. That cot was supposed to be for the group. And I was like, no, it wasn't. That cot was for us. We had a reservation for a room with 2 beds. You only had 1 bed, so they sent us up a cot. And no, this is our cot. And she goes, no, I need that cot back. And I was like, well, lady, I'll be honest, you're gonna have to fist fight me for this cot. So I don't know, if you and these 2 Mexicans wanna come in here and hold me down to the ground and pry this cot from my cold, dead hands, then maybe you can have it, but I'm not giving it back to you. I'm not going back to a world where I'm sharing a bed with Rob, all right? That's not happening. This is our cot. You can't have it. And she was angry. She was really angry because she knows that she can't fist fight me and take the cot. Like, that's got to be against Radisson hotel policy. You can't fist fight. So she was just angry, and she's like, well, you have to give it back to us. And we were fighting for a while, and I was like, well, I won't give it back. I don't care. And we're here for 4 days. I'm keeping this cot for all 4 days, so figure it out. And then she tried other tactics. So she tried to extort me at one point. She goes, she was like, well, if you're gonna keep the cot, we're gonna charge you for the cot. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's kind of messed up because you gave it to me and now you're charging me for it later. But okay, how much are you gonna charge me for the cot? And she goes, it'll be $10. And I was like, that's the most insulting thing anyone's ever said to me. Did you think you were gonna break me for the $10 for the cot? Like I was gonna be like, ooh, $10, all right, well, me and Rob will spoon for the rest of the week. I mean, I don't got that type of scratch lying around, but so I was like, okay, fine, charge me the $10, whatever. And then she just realized she was defeated. Like there was nothing else she could do. She got the $10 from me. I'm not giving up the cot. So as they were walking away, by the way, this whole time, these 2 Mexicans have no idea what's going on. They have no idea what we're screaming about. They're like, dude, I'm just trying to do my job and go home to my family. So she goes, fine, and they start walking away. And then as her last tactic was she tried to guilt me. She tried to guilt me as she walked away, and she looks at me, and she goes, just so you know, someone in the group is gonna have to sleep on the floor. And I was like, lady, I hope this hotel burns to the ground with every member of the group still inside of it, okay? You think I care if they're sleeping on the floor? I hate you, I hate the Radisson, and now I hate this group. And I don't even know what the group is. Like, I hope it's a group of evil people, because I hate them now. And then they left. And then I was talking to my friend Rob afterward, because it was one of those moments where you come back in and your friend Rob's there, and you're just thankful you have a friend who saw that whole thing happen, because someone may not believe you if it is. So I was like, you saw that, that's insane, right? And he goes, yeah, that's insane. He was like, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. And then he says to me, and now I think my friend Rob is crazy too. He goes, that's crazy, and I've never had a bad experience at a Radisson before. And then he was quiet for like a second, and then he went, actually, the first time I was at a Radisson, a guy staying there got stabbed. And I was like, what? So you're telling me this is the second worst thing that's happened to you at a Radisson? And a guy got stabbed at a Radisson and you kept going back to Radissons? And then, when talking about it, you went, I've never had a bad experience at the Radisson. How good were your in-between stays at the Radisson? Anyway, that was the story. And we didn't know who the group was, but I just wasn't going to give up the cot. We never got our room cleaned for the 4 days we were there. Do not disturb on every day, as I knew they'd try to take that cot from me. I wouldn't give it up. But I found the group. It was the next day. I came in at big group, and Indian students competing in a spelling bee competition. That's who the group was. I know. I was hoping it was like the clown or something, but it was hard to hate them. I was like, these are just kids spelling words none of us will ever use in our lives. And they were there, and they were flooding the lobby. So it took like 45 minutes to get into the elevator because there was one elevator, and each time it would just be jam-packed with high school Indian spelling bee contestants. And I finally got in there after 45 minutes, and I'm squeezed in, just squeezed into this little elevator with all of these spelling bee students around me. And I was just looking around, making eye contact with every one of them. And I was like, one of you is sleeping on the floor because of me. Like, that's what I did. I hope you get rug burn all night long. All right, man. Well, listen, I gotta say, and I really mean this quite sincerely, I've been very fortunate in my career. I've been able to do some pretty cool things. Been on some cool shows, and I get to do what I love and support my family that way. But by far, the coolest thing I've ever done in my career is two things. There was going on Ron Paul's Liberty Report was just like, to me, that was like a dream. That's my hero, and coming here to the Mises University. So thank you guys all so much. I appreciate it so much. I love you guys. Long live the Mises Institute. Thank you. Come on up. Let's hang. Let's do it over here.
I guess
got a little bit of a raspy voice actually. You take it up to 11.
I've never seen it. I was ever so long. Who were the purple?
It wasn't.
Yep. You like that? You think that was funny? What? No. He's a comedian. He's joking. He's kidding. We're going to do some more after the award. So. He's joking? Yes, he's joking. Talk to Andreas? Huh? You want to take a nap? Yeah. Should I take a picture? All right.
One more. All right.
All right. Sir, you sit
No, I can return the favor. I think, you got a picture, Charlie? You gonna get a picture?
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna try. If you want to be touched.
No, you
go first.
No, you got it. Hello, come on up.
Thank you.
Would you like a portrait of...
they're going to be in Austin instead. So we're pleased to switch it out.
Are you giving out the awards now?
I am.
Yeah, so you have to get the hell off.
Yeah.
Or do you want to do the
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you want to do something? Okay, go ahead, that's fine.
He's not taking it.
Oh, he's not? Okay, good.
I thought he had a flight ticket. What's his shirt? Oh, that's
Now we have a white one. Actually, we had a white one saying stuff on it.
Yeah, those are, we haven't had those.
I know, they were great. Have one every year. They were wonderful. I know.
Okay, I know you're all hungry, but this is something that is really the height of Mises University, when we recognize those people who have shown that they've absorbed the knowledge here or have been here in the past and are now have returned as graduate students. So I would like to recognize those people who have been our summer research fellows since May, and some of them were here since February. That program revolves around research. They do research on their dissertations or in writing publishable articles. And this is something that the faculty really enjoys, to interact with the fellows and to watch them over the course of their careers, because they return later on in various capacities, including as instructors here at Mises University. So what I want to do is to recognize them, have them stand, and please hold your applause, and then we will move on to other matters. So let me start with Nicholas Cooper, Dr. Lukasz Dominiak, who's a visiting scholar, Marcel Gautreau, Christopher Hansen, Elias Huber, Gordon Miller, please pick that up. Dr. Patrick Newman, he's not here, Norbert Slenzak, Vytautas Zukauskis, and let's have a nice round of applause for them. Thank you. And Anna Kruk, whose name was not on here, not due to me. So great job, ladies and gentlemen. I now want to announce the people who have passed the exam and who have won honors and prizes in our oral exam. And our oral exam, which was, I think, named by Dr. Guido Hulsmann, it's called the Mundliche Prüfung. And it's got some kind of sinister meaning. It's a German word. We just call it oral exam. It's an optional exam for students who would like to have their knowledge tested at the end of the conference. Preliminary written testing took place on Thursday to determine who is qualified to take the exam today. 78 students took the preliminary exam. 19 of those scored 19 or more correct answers out of 24, which is really an all-time high for the average. They qualified for the oral exams, those 19. 6 students passed the oral exam, and 9 passed with honors. Certificates for passing the oral exam are at the registration table. So let me name out, again, have people stand up as I name them. Those people who passed and passed with honors. These are the people who passed. Juan Ignacio Ibanez, please stand. Thomas McGugan, Noah Mickle, Rohan Ray, Nate Strum, Evan Vincent. Congratulations. Passing with honors, we have Catherine Agent, Anton Chamberlain, Jacob McDowell, Levi Edwards, Alan Futterman, Gore McCurchian, Christian Mullins, Ohad Osterreicha, and Vitautis Zukowskis. Thank you. And now for the awards. These are the 3 prize winners. Third place award, the Grant Aldrich Prize, in the amount of $500 goes to Anton Chamberlain. Please come up. The second prize, the Grant Aldrich Prize in the amount of $1,000 goes to Vitautis Zukowskis. And the first place award, which is the Douglas E. French Prize of $2,500, goes to Christian Mullins. Great job. Does that end our business? Okay, so now I want to introduce our president, Jeff Deist, to make some closing remarks.
All right, thanks, Joe. And now, as Tom Woods would say, 2,500 smackers. So well done, Christian. Look, I just wanted to close with this. We've got barbecue and hot dogs and hamburgers and beer and wine outside. But now all of us and all of you are alums of this organization. And I hope you think of it that way. And you're an alum based on a shared interest and a passion for economics and first principles and liberty, not based on football teams or some sort of undergraduate memories. So we deeply appreciate all of you making it here and taking the time, and we hope to see all of you again. And more than anything, we hope that you stay connected with us and stay in touch with us, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks so much.